she dropped her cup in the
No.
sink, so.
I thought you'd break things after the results of the election. Something made a clutter back there. I said, I thought you'd break things after the results of the election.
She's safe.
All right. Good morning and welcome. This is the November 5th, 2019 City Council meeting for the City of Hutchinson. Linda, if you would, please call the roll.
Deckent.
Here?
Dave Line.
Here.
Soldner.
Here.
Iris de Carvalho.
Here.
Inskeep.
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is the prayer, and Mr. Gary Giddings is here to help us with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we pray? Our gracious Heavenly Father, we are mindful today of the many blessings that are ours as Americans, especially on this day as we go to the ballot box to cast our vote. We pray for wisdom and discernment in that process, and for those who govern us, wisdom and discernment and guidance in their duties. We thank you for those who give of their time and their energy to serve us in this capacity, and in other ways throughout our community. We are blessed to be residents of Hutchinson, Kansas, and we pray that you'd be glorified and that your glory and blessing would shine down on us today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Item 4A, proclamation for Veterans Appreciation Month.
If I could ask a fellow veteran, Marvin Hall, commander of VFW Post 1361, to join me. Thank you. And I'll read this. Whereas, since the birth of our nation, American patriots have stepped forward to serve our country and defend our way of life. Whereas, with honor and distinction, generations of servicemen and women have taken up arms to win our independence, preserve our union, and secure our freedom. Whereas, these heroes have put their lives on the line so that we might live in a world that is safer, freer, and more just, and we owe them a profound debt of gratitude. Whereas, throughout the month of November, the citizens of Reno County salute the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen who have rendered the highest service any American can offer. Whereas, November 11, 2019 marks the 65th anniversary of the modern Veterans Day holiday and the 100th anniversary of the first Armistice Day commemorating the end of World War I. Whereas, numerous celebrations, events, and remembrances will be held throughout the month of November in Reno County. Now, therefore, I, David A. Inskeep, Mayor of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, do hereby recognize the month of November 2019 as Veterans Appreciation Month, and call upon the citizens of Hutchinson to dedicate themselves to fulfilling our commitment to all those who serve in our name and honoring those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. All citizens are hereby encouraged to participate in the celebrations, events, and remembrances that will be held throughout the month of November. And if you'd like, Marvin, you feel free to say a few words.
I'd just like to thank the City of Hutchinson, the mayor, and all the people for the donations and all the support they give to the VFW. It's very important, and I want you to know we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Perfect. Next item, if you would, please.
Item 5, oral communications from the audience.
Wonderful. This is the portion of the meeting, again, where we offer for those in the audience that want to address the council. We ask that you limit your comments to things that are not on the agenda. If you'll also give your name and your address, and limit your remarks to 5 minutes, if you would, please. Mr. Pound.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Morning, Lavelle. Thank you.
I'm Laveau Pounds. I reside at 512 East Avenue A here in Hutchinson, Kansas. Been in the last couple meetings in that. You'll see another list of some items there that I bring into your attention again. There's some, most of them are tree violations. There's one in a roofing violation, which is on a gazebo at the park on the golf course down there. But the trees are in violation of your city code of Chapter 11, Article 4, Section 11-402, duty to remove dead trees and limbs. Also Chapter 11, Article 5, Section 11-501, Number 2, no tree within 10 feet of a fire hydrant. I've been in conversation with Mr. Combs. He has stated that the point I have been trying to make these last several meetings, in his opinion, has been made. And that point is basically too much government oversight with regards to the public citizens and businesses. He pointed out to me that there is also another area in the city code book that refers to trees and fire plugs also. That contradicts the code that I am pointing out to you here in Chapter 11, which is basically a tree code in the city code book. Chapter 11 refers to trees. This is a perfect example of my point. If you continue to install more codes upon the citizens in the city, you need to at least know what you already have in the code books. And we keep adding more and more codes upon the public and the businesses here, it seems like, year after year. The one that he's referring to, he could not find for me at that time when I was meeting with him yesterday evening or late afternoon. And I didn't see him here this morning. Oh, there he is. Did you happen to find it? Okay, so he might be able to make a reference to that also as to when that came in. The code I'm referring to was put in 94, okay? So anyway, I appreciate the time that Mr. Combs has given me, and I do very much appreciate that, in conversation and his understanding of my concern. As I pointed out to him, it is not a personal vendetta or anything against him. I'm disappointed and upset with the amount of codes that we have as publics and businesses to deal with here in the city. I don't like the answer when I come to the city offices here though and talk, and I heard it again yesterday, that the items that I'm pointing out or these repairs need to be made. I'm sorry, they're not in the budget. The city only has so much money in the budget to take care of things. That doesn't hold water with me on that part of it. I just don't think that's quite fair. Painting on rentals is a cosmetic thing for the most part. Most all those are cosmetic repairs. Aesthetics, you want it to look nice. I can understand that. Has nothing to do though with the safety of the rental property, the livability of the rental property. Those are the things that you should be concerned more with than versus the aesthetics of it. I know an investor who spent over $15,000 this year painting 2 properties. Just the exterior painting on those to get them hired out is rather expensive, and definitely you're not going to get it done in a 30-day period. That part, though, I think has been addressed, and you are looking at that. But again, those $15,000 to paint 2 properties, that's aesthetics. More actual repairs could be done for safety features if you would concentrate, I believe, on those and not the aesthetics of these. I reiterate, I don't like the code enforcement on one part of the public and not the other. I think that is going to be addressed. It sounds like you guys are starting to look at that, and that the public's going to start getting, the residential homeowners are going to start getting hit with the same violations. That's going to be another interesting time to watch when they start getting all those violations written up to the homeowners. My concern from the last meeting, though, about 3 separate sets of rules, I think is coming true. One for the landlord, one for the residential, and one for the city. And it seems to be in response from this fire plug and the tree situation here. I've got a code right there. You've got it in the books that states that those have to be removed, and that they were planted in violation of that code. I do rate a response personally. I would like to hear from somebody other than Mr. Combs. He's been very good about taking my calls and taking times to meet with me regarding these violations on these. I don't like that when you continue to put in more and more codes and more restrictions on the city, you're restricting the rights of the citizens, but you're also restricting, I believe, a lot of businesses coming into town here just because of all the rules and regulations that we're placing on them. So with that, I appreciate your time on that again. And again, Mr. Combs, thank you for your time the last several days.
Thank you again for bringing these to our attention, and I apologize. I don't know which conversation led you to believe or who told you that we don't have it within the budget. I don't
Your
see
inspector.
anything on this.
Your city inspector.
Okay, well then he's inaccurate in that. I don't see anything on this budget, or excuse me, on these photographs or
No,
prior
the one he
photographs.
probably was referring to was at that point was I did refer back to a sidewalk repair
Oh,
that I had pointed out about a month ago.
Okay.
And I had pointed out also that I came in yesterday asking, we're all given 30 days and then we get a notice that says we have to appear in court. And I came in and asked for the paper that I could file to find out who for sure I get to take that should appear in court, because these repairs were not done within 30 days. These fire plugs have been over 30 days. Some of but the sidewalks definitely had been.
Right.
But the sidewalk was the one he was referring to more so. But then also I got a comment from one department. Well, that's the other department that handles that part about to go to court. So I go from one department to the other, and then that department says, no, it's not us. It's somebody else. I'm not sure who it is. So again, it's the moving around and nobody answering the question.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
this is the first I'm seeing of these.
Sure.
Well,
Well, I mean,
some are.
you gotta have 'em. Yeah.
So once we've got those, then I'm sure we'll see to it that.
Well, I'd be
somebody will
curious as to
percolate.
how that responds. Like you said, I haven't got a look at the one that he and I talked about yesterday. He says there is another one in there that contradicts that one.
Oh, it's factual.
And
I've
you
read
guys
it.
have already looked
Yeah.
at it then. So,
Yeah.
and so that's disturbing to me.
And-
I mean, why?
Yeah, the latter code I would think would be more lax in its interpretation, and so it would not be as restricting. So I know what you're saying is we're adding more code upon code, but that one
If you're
would
gonna-
actually be a loosening of the code. I think the negligence was in cleaning up the original verbiage.
Okay.
That should
Okay.
have been done. You're not wrong. They
Okay.
contradict.
I
Absolutely.
appreciate it. Thank
So,
you.
thank you again.
Mayor, I see on the agenda, under the city manager's report, there's an item called downtown trees. Is this the appropriate time to talk about that, or wait until your report?
I think this covered it, and there really isn't anything to report other than that we're not cutting trees downtown. We're not cutting them down, because they're not in violation of Section 27, which is our new landscape ordinance. The shade tree or the tree board talked about this. They'll clean up some language, but we're not planning on cutting down any trees downtown.
Right, and the tree board did look at that. They looked at all facets of it, and they're looking at cleaning up the language in the.
And to my knowledge, we've never cited anybody for 10 feet by, a fire hydrant or anything like that, so.
John,
And this really isn't an agenda item, so
Okay.
I think we need to move on from oral
Yeah.
communications, so.
Okay,
Okay. Well, put it on the agenda sometime. I'd be happy to come back.
very fine. Thank you
Okay.
again. Appreciate it. Okay, anybody else wants to address the council? Sir. And again, same thing. If you'll give your name, your address, and limit your remarks to 5 minutes, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Marvin Mast. I live at 206th in Hutchinson with my family, our family. And just one thing I'd like to point out, I'm also a member of the Hutchinson Housing Commission. And in the agenda, there's a missing page in relation to the minutes. There's one page that was not included in the agenda, at least the agenda that's online that I had access to. I had asked city staff for a copy of the commission meeting minutes prior to today, and they declined to give those to me because they hadn't been approved.
This is in regards to item E, is that correct? Under the,
Yes, the rental registration program. And so the Hutchinson Commission minutes of our meeting on October 23rd are included in this packet, in the agenda packet, but there's a missing page
okay.
that's not included. So I don't know what that page says. The page that has the results of the Housing Commission did vote 4-2 not to continue the
Right.
licensing program. That is included in the minutes, but there is an entire page that's missing, so I just wanted to point that
I
out.
appreciate your heads up. We'll address that when we get to that item, but
Very
thank you
good.
for the
I wasn't
heads up
sure
on
when to say that, so.
that. Yeah, no, that's fine.
Thank you.
Again, anyone else with items that are not currently on the agenda, but you want to speak to the council about? All right, seeing no more. Next item, please.
Item 6, consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to either discuss now or put wherever you'd like to put items B and C in regards to the regional, to our airport.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Let's visit about that now. What's your thoughts?
Well, I'd kind of like to have, and I'd asked the Peters here, just kind of a review on the T-hanger leases, where we were when we first began talking about this. And I know that prices were such that I think we needed to modify the length of the bond that we're utilizing. And also, are the rents that you referred to in your memo that's in our packet what we expected when we last talked about this a few months ago?
Sure. Thank you, Peter.
Peter Miller, Hutchinson Airport Manager, and to basically jump kind of right into it, in your packet I think there are 5 leases right now. There's actually 2 more that came in the other day, and then there's still 1 more pending that I'm supposed to get back from that gentleman anytime. Those leases are all year-to-year leases for the T-hangers that we just built, and they are running $240 a month for the first 12 months, and then after that they increase 3% for the next 10 years. And those, I mean, I've got the numbers on there, 240 the first year, 247. Basically in the first 12 months we will generate $23,040, assuming they're full, and by year 10 we'll be making $30,057, again assuming that they maintain tenants in them. So
Is that what we anticipated, the 240, Peter, when we last talked at least?
Yes, that was the number we came up with. I think I was instructed to try to get the initial investment from the city to get that return on investment paid off within 20 years.
Right.
And this will put us right at about 19 years at the way the
Okay.
project came out. So.
Good.
I have seen the hangers, by the way. They do look nice. I was able to,
It's pretty
gave
exciting.
me a ride around that day to avoid the mud that was out there at the point in time. So they are good.
Sure.
It's good to have those. Help my memory. The total cost, actually, since we've completed the project versus what we first initially thought, it was higher, as I remember.
Yes, yeah. The initial cost back in I guess it was end of 2017 when we were putting together when I was putting together the budget numbers for this project. I initially asked for about $370,000. I made some assumptions that we were going to do some stuff kind of in-house and try to budget engineer this as much as we could. By the time we got around to actually getting the hangars built and everything bid out and the project put together and the contractors on board, it did admittedly go a little bit higher than what we planned, and by a little bit I mean probably close to about 40% higher than what it is. Worked with Justin and the finance department. We had some leftover monies from some other projects we had out there that came in under, and so there was a little bit of money we could transfer into that. And then the idea was also, when the project was all said and done, we were expecting it to be about $25,000 to $28,000 higher than what we had in the total project budget. And then that would then be made up for with the reserve accounts that we've got at the airport and the facility reserve accounts. And that is still the case. We're still finalizing the numbers on the T-hanger. Just kind of as a side note too, the aircraft all moved in yesterday. So 5 of the 6 have aircraft in them right now, and the rest of them will fill up probably within the next week or so.
Peter, you pegged it right when you said build it and they will come. That's an excellent outcome.
There is not an empty T-hanger in the state, and there hasn't been for decades. So we'll fill them. There's planes.
And the 20 years, or 19 plus a few months, that's what we had planned on initially?
What we had planned on initially. I'd have to look at my notes. When I originally did the project budget, I was trying to aim for about 15 years, and that $370,000 initial project cost, that would have been paid off in about 15 years. I was also trying really hard to keep it below about $220 a month. You get too high and you're going to have, it starts getting pricey to keep planes out there. So we have to remain competitive with some of the other airports. But like I said,
Even with the 240, are we staying competitive?
we're pretty competitive,
close.
Especially if you see how big and how nice the hangars are. Once they put the planes in there, there's not too many people that have moved into a brand new hangar. Well, nobody's moved into a brand new hangar at Hutch in 50 years, but they seem to be pretty thrilled.
Good,
So,
good. Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate
oh,
that.
no problem.
Related to the air traffic control lease, reading your memo, it sounded, if I understood it correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the FAA has basically said, when we put money into building an air traffic control facility, tower, et cetera, we're not going to turn around and pay rent for the thing that we helped build. Is that
That's
kind of what you
essentially-
said? Or
Yeah,
what-
that's essentially what.
And yet we own the tower here, but they've still indicated the space that, help me with that.
Sure, sure. So, trying to give you some kind of quick kind of air traffic control kind of 101. So there's basically three types of towers. There are federal towers, there are contract towers, and there are cost share towers. So federal contract towers are owned by the federal government, and they're staffed by FAA employees. Those are generally the bigger airports, Wichita, Denver, Kansas City Center, places like that. Then there are contract towers, which are towers in which the airport sponsor, in this case the city, the airports own the facility themselves, and the FAA pays a private company to staff that tower. And then there's cost share, which is kind of a combination of the two. Generally, the airport sponsor, the city, owns the tower, but they also pay a certain percentage of the wages and the operations of that tower, and the FAA picks up the difference. So we are a contract tower, meaning we pay for the upkeep of the tower, heating, air conditioning, carpet, paint, door locks, things like that. But the controllers in our control tower work for a company called Midwest ATC out of Kansas City, and their salaries and benefit packages and everything are paid 100% by the FAA. So in about the last 5 or 6 years, the FAA has they've started looking at all the different control towers, and I don't know if you remember the whole ATC privatization thing that kind of keeps popping its head up. The FAA didn't decide. They started looking at building new towers throughout the country. There was an influx of new towers that were built in the 50s and the 60s, including ours. As these facilities age, the FAA was like, okay, some of the bigger, busier airports that we built the towers in the 50s, we need new towers to meet ADA requirements and just basically personnel staffing and all the new things that they have to do. So when the FAA built these new towers in the last 5 or 6 years, whoever it was at the FAA decided, okay, we just spent $10 million to build a tower. We are spending whatever it is, to staff the tower. We're also not going to rent that tower because we just built it and we're putting the people in it. So they decided, in order to keep things consistent, that was going to trickle all the way down to including towers that were already here that they were renting and staffing. So now there are no towers where they pay rent. They are only paying for the staffing. So it was just time for them to work down the list and check off the box at Hutchinson saying we need to amend the lease and remove the square footage for the rent that they're paying. So
What is the budget impact on that?
it's going to, I think I put in the memo about $9,000 a year is what's going to affect the revenue for the airport.
So what are they paying rent for? What's remaining?
Right now they're paying $33,352, and so that is for there's. I try not to make it too overly complicated. There's actually two different things going on there. There's the control tower, and then there's our sector field office. Those are the FAA technicians that take care of all the items on the airfield that we don't own, and they also take care of lots of other airports, items that are owned by the federal government. They base out of our airport and then drive to the different airports. They rent all that office space, including the radio rooms and the storage and the office space. So that is still being paid for because there are employees that work out of there. All they really subtracted was the square footage of the control tower and the square footage of the air traffic control manager's office space that they were renting from us. So just the items that direct the items that impact air traffic directly were removed from the lease. Everything else stayed the same. So.
Do you
So
believe
this-
we're positioned strong enough to continue our tower here in Hutchinson?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. The,
Not an issue?
Yeah, again, without getting too granular, if we lost more than 30% over the next 5 years of traffic, then they would come back in and do what's called a cost-benefit ratio, and that's when you start looking at the tower share programs, like I talked about, the cost share program.
Okay.
So we're still good traffic-wise. So good.
So this wasn't wasn't a negotiation. They came in and told us what they were going to be paying us.
Yeah, in my 12 years working with the FAA, there's generally not a whole lot of negotiation.
Yeah.
They pretty much tell you what they're going to do. So, yeah.
So it's not an agreement. We're being told what we'll
This
accept. and
this
take and-
lease agreement was given to us by them in 2012. When they want to change it, they send us a new one and said, sign this or we're pulling out of the tower. So.
Yeah, all in all, to have a controlled tower, it's still a pretty good deal for us. I mean, it's
absolutely.
And
Yeah,
you're right, we didn't have
it's
much
kinda
of a
what we're going
choice,
for.
but the alternative is to not have a controlled tower.
Okay. Well, I read it correctly then, and it puzzled
Yeah.
me a little bit if that it was to the
I
the
probably
towers
could have
they
worded
had
that a little differently, but
put money into building that the one that we own, they're still not going to pay.
right. Well, that being said, maybe we should build a new tower now.
Oh, boy.
Well,
Thank you.
you do whatever you need to do. Do whatever you need to do to make that
Okay, all right,
application to the
that's your budget,
FAA.
got it.
Thanks,
So-
Peter.
Thanks for the clarification. Steve, good questions.
I think, Mayor, you can just do the consent as a whole. We talked about taking it off, but we never really did do that.
Didn't do
so
that yet.
that's
We
fine.
just, looked a little deeper into the
Yeah,
items.
that's
So,
fine.
yeah. Is there a motion to?
Motion
approve?
to approve the consent agenda and authorize the mayor to sign?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dayblind?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes, next item.
Item 7A, consider ordinance authorizing issuance and delivery of general obligation refunding and improvement bonds.
Morning, Angela.
Good morning. Angela Richard, Director of Finance. I also have Dustin from Piper Jeffrey and Tyler from Kutek Rock here, in case we have any questions. On October 1st, the council had adopted a resolution of intent to authorize refunding bonds for several general obligation bonds and the 2006 and 2009 KDHE loans. We had anticipated at that time that we might save around $512,000 by refinancing these. We are able to announce that we got a little bit better of results than that. We used Commerce Bank as our underwriter, and we were able to get an average interest rate for the tax-exempt bonds, because remember there's taxable and tax-exempt here. The tax-exempt bonds, we achieved 1.69% interest rate. We had thought that might be about 1.9. And then for the taxable bonds, we achieved an interest rate of 2.73. We thought it might be about 2.8%. So our total savings were $603,000. So that's better than anticipated. To do this, we need you to authorize the ordinance for issue and delivery of both the 2019A and 2019B, and then the resolution prescribing the forms and details and authorizing the delivery of both the 2019A and 2019B as separate motions. Then we would be set to close on November 25th. So are there any questions?
Well, I want to know what you're going to do when you have to come and say, hey, the rate's gone up.
Yeah.
We have been fortunate, haven't we?
We have been fortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, so.
Mr. Manager, and maybe Angela, is this the time to talk about also the change in our bond rating?
Yeah, we could. I mean, we have typically when we do issue bonds like this, we have a bond rating call. S&P was ours. Moody's was ours, yeah. And I think I sent out in the weekly report that through that call and the information, and Dustin was on the phone with us as well, our rating basically stayed AA3 But the last rating we had was AA3 with a negative watch. This one was AA3. The negative watch was taken off. And the negative watch, and Dustin probably knows more about this than I, but was really more about some of the cash positions that we were in, and we were able to turn those around, our fund balances, and show that it's not just our general fund balance, but we also have reserve funds in our capital improvement and our equipment reserve fund that technically could be used in the general fund if we needed it. And so those all compiled showed that we were very strong there. And so overall, we had a real good rating, which talks a lot about the financial position that the city finds itself in. And if you want a more technical explanation of that, Dustin or Angela can probably help you. But all in all, it was a good call.
That also contributes to better rates,
It does.
opportunities, and things like that.
Yeah, it really does. It was a good, and you know, Piper and Dustin are very helpful on those calls to point out some of the things. I remember last year we had that call and really pointed out it's not just the general fund balance. It's because some cities do it differently and keep all those capital improvement reserves in the general fund. And so when you put those all together, our fund balance is much larger than what we typically talk about in just our general fund balance. So.
Thank you for explaining that as well.
You know, John, I'd just like to say, I appreciate that report. It was very, very interesting to read that and try to understand it. But this, folks, I think for the general public is really an affirmation of what good fiscal management we as a city of Hutchinson have in terms of our professional management and our financial advisors. And we should not take that for granted, because that's such a critical part of operating this city. And so my congratulations and appreciation to all of you for that.
Thank you.
And Dustin has even gone so far to put together a summary, which I haven't read yet because I've been sick, but comparing whether Moody's is better for us to use as a rating firm or S&P, Standard & Poor's.
Yeah.
So he's even gone beyond to look at that as well.
Right.
Did that change in rating, or at least the removal of the with negative, have any impact on these current bonds that we're talking about this morning?
I can't say how much it had an impact.
Dustin, you might want to just talk about what that effect is.
Good morning. Again, Dustin.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good to see everyone. So great question. I will reiterate what John had mentioned too. I think that the AA3 rating, when you compare that to other cities in Kansas, you're very well rated and very appropriate rated, and it's really a indication of strong fiscal management and budget management. So I do want to reiterate that component of it. In terms of, I think we worked really, really hard on getting the negative removed from the rating. And as John alluded to, is really just an understanding of fund balances and how cities categorize certain funds and where they keep them, and knowing that even though funds are maybe held in different buckets, correct, thank you, they can still be used for general fund purposes. So to answer your question about the rating and the impact on this financing, I think it certainly does help. How to quantify that, it's hard to quantify the actual dollars or interest rate that it may make. But just to give you some perspective, if you were at a next notch lower, so you were at AA3 currently, if we were at a A1, which would be a notch lower than a AA3, it probably have between a 5 basis point and 10 basis points difference in your rate. And so, again, the negative sometimes has a negative connotation in the marketplace, and so it's like, well, is it going to be downgraded? Because that's really what people ask. And so if it's downgraded, that's certainly going to have an impact on your rate. But obviously, it being at just a stable AA3 certainly does help you in the marketplace. And obviously, Commerce Bank did an incredible job with the underwriting of the bonds. The city did receive 6 proposals for underwriting services, and so we evaluated those proposals and selected Commerce Bank based upon their performance and how they showed in the RFP process.
Give some comparison. You mentioned that a step down from AA3 is A1. What's above AA3?
AA2.
And is that the highest rating then?
AAA. So
AAA is the...
Yep, so we go AAA, and then we go AA1, AA2, AA3, and then the A category, A1, A2, A3. And so part of what we do too is I know Angela referenced the comparison. It's a way for the city to evaluate itself from a financial perspective in the eyes of how rating agencies view cities, not only in Kansas but nationally, and making a comparison to other cities of comparable ratings or even higher ratings. So as we benchmark the city, we can then look at another city and say, okay, well, another city's rated one notch higher. How are they positioned from a fundamental financial position? And there's something that we can do as a city to improve our overall rating. Keeping in mind that the rating process is just not financials. There are things in the rating process that we can't control either, right? We can't necessarily control our tax base, right? We necessarily can't control economy. But really what it's intended to do is say, okay, on the things that we can control, right, for the most part, budgetary matters, are there things that we can do as a city to put ourselves in a better financial position from a bond rating perspective?
Well, I know it was our intent during the last two budgetary cycles was to be very mindful of our ending fund balance. And I don't know that we necessarily had bond rating in mind in doing so, but as a positive side effect of prioritizing that and making sure that it's at an appropriate level, it certainly had a good positive outcome.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
absolutely.
Is a AA2 or higher something possible for us, or something we should aspire to? If so, yes, why, or no, or?
So there's always a balancing act. I think that's the key with credit rating. Sometimes it's a secondary component to just your normal budgeting practices and policies. Because you think about, you're really trying to balance operational needs of the city, and also then, I'm making some assumption, budgetary needs, but also then mill levies, right? And so it could be, if we want to say we want to be at the next level up, well, the simple way to do that would be we could increase our levies, right, and generate more cash and just keep our cash in an account. Is that the best use of tax dollars, right? So again, I would say most cities are they want to maintain healthy reserves, maintain a policy that requires reasonable reserves, and then obviously continue to budget accordingly and appropriately based upon city needs going forward. So I would say there's always a chance to get upgraded, and I think if the trends were to continue where the city could maintain or slightly improve fund balances on an annual basis, that certainly could be a possibility in the future. But again, there's also things that you cannot control, which are big components of the equation also.
Yeah. Even during the call, I mean, there's a lot of questions about development, new jobs being created, new projects, growth, those kind of things, and that's what is more difficult to control for us. And you know, if we were in a metro Johnson County type area that's seeing growth, then our rating would be higher, obviously, just based on our financial position. But so there's some things that are difficult to address during those calls. But overall, good ratings.
Definitely.
Yeah, very good.
Very good outcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you.
good. Thank you, Bill. Are there any other questions or a motion?
I move we consider an ordinance authorizing issuance and delivery, I move to approve ordinance authorizing the issuance and delivery of $8,565,000 principal amount of general obligation refunding and improvement bonds, Series 2019A, of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, and providing for the levy and collection of an annual tax for the purpose of paying the principal of and interest on the bonds as they become due, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Perfect. A motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Deviant?
Yes.
Dave
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Is there a motion on item B?
I move to approve the resolution prescribing the form and details of and authorizing the delivery of $8.565 million principal amount of general obligation refunding and improvement bonds, Series 2019-A of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, previously authorized by an ordinance of the city, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deviant?
Yes.
Dave
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Item C, is there a motion?
Could I ask?
Oh, please.
I would
This
move
is just
to-
the second part
Oh,
of.
yeah, you
of-
want to,
Right.
All of
Elaborate
the
on that?
comments
Yeah.
you made apply to the
Exactly.
taxable.
The ones you've already passed are for the tax
Tax
exempt,
exempt,
and
and
now
these are
you're
for
doing the taxable.
Taxable,
Okay.
yeah.
So I apologize, a lot of words, but it's.
Well, and I thought you summarized within
Yeah.
your comments, so yeah, very good.
I would move to approve ordinance authorizing the issuance and delivery of $3,490,000 principal amount of general obligation refunding bonds, Series 2019-B of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, and providing for the levy and collection of an annual tax for the purpose of paying the principal of and the interest on the bonds as they become due, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Wow. Take your pick, Linda.
Yeah.
If you'll call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave-Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Item D.
I'll move to approve a resolution prescribing the form and details of and authorizing the delivery of 3.49 million principal amount of general obligation refunding bonds, Series 2019-B, taxable under federal law of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, previously authorized by an ordinance of the city, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Linda, please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave-Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 7E, consider ordinance regarding residential rental licensing and inspection.
Ryan. Morning, Ryan.
Morning, Mayor. Morning, members of the council. For the record, my name is Ryan Vietluk, Director of Planning and Development with the City of Hutchinson. Before you this morning is the rental licensing and inspection program. What staff is requesting is a motion to approve or deny an ordinance amending the rental registration and inspection ordinance and establishing a rental licensing and inspection ordinance with an associated fee schedule. So this has been before this body several times, so I'll be rather brief in my comments, focusing mostly on some of the financial analysis and the administrative costs, because that has been something that I think has come up and may have been kind of lost in some of the discussion here. So before I get started, Housing Commission did have this before them at their meeting on October 23rd, and they did deny a motion to recommend the ordinance as written to the City Council with a vote of 2-4 with one abstention. We had a bit of a change on the Housing Commission. We had a couple of vacant positions that were filled, and then we had some people that were missing. So it kind of ended up, I think, changing the vote a little bit more. So staff was surprised because they've been rather supportive the whole time. But there were some comments from the landlords, and I think there were some concerns from some of the members of the Housing Commission of what effect this is really going to have with the voluntary inspection component of it. So also to address Commissioner Mast's concerns about the minutes. The minutes that are in here are just excerpt minutes. We did not want to put all the pages of the minutes in there. It's just we put the portion of the meeting that was dealing with this topic. There are other topics that were discussed at the meeting, but we did not include those in those minutes because it was not germane really to the discussion of this item. So
I see, for example, on page 2 of the minutes, the first couple items on that page have to do with the land bank agent in place. So that those are what you're referring to as things that weren't directly involved in.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So just another way to kind of cut down the 400-page packet to maybe 398 pages. So, so that was the recommendation that Housing Commission did bring forward to this body. So just a little bit of background. The current rental registration inspection program was enacted in April of 2015. There have been a couple amendments since, but it is set to sunset on December 31st. Council did direct Housing Commission to review and study this issue and prepare an update to the program. This was in response to changing state law as well as feedback from landlords and tenants. There have been several public meetings held to discuss this topic. The first one was held back on September 10th, where there was a joint City Council and Housing Commission study session. The Housing Commission had a public meeting on September 25th, where there was about 90 minutes of public comment. City Council then had, you all had this before you all on October 1st, where I believe there was about an hour, a little bit more than an hour of public comment. And then Housing Commission did hold a public hearing on October 23rd, and there was about a half hour of public comment. So there's been quite a bit of public comment. I think we're up to about 3 hours on this, and I think that's understandable because this is a complex issue, and there's a lot of moving pieces with it. So I'm not really going to go into a lot of these comments. These are things that you all have kind of seen before, but the Housing Commission, as I said, on September 25th, there was a 90-minute public hearing. CKLA was in attendance. They had some concerns. Those concerns have continued throughout this process. The realtors, we have spoken with them, and they do oppose the changes, and they do support sunset and expiration. Kansas Association of Realtors also opposes rental registration mandates, basically statewide. They believe the only legitimate reason is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of tenants. Staff does believe that this ordinance, that's its main purpose, is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of tenants. There have been some concerns about HUD insured properties, that they already require a third-party inspection. There has been some comments of maybe exempting those properties from inspections. The inspections are already voluntary. HUD does do inspections, so I think maybe the question is, do we exempt HUD properties from licensing? And I believe staff would say that's probably not a good tack to take, because while we have some of our nonprofits that have Section 8 and HUD homes, we also have a lot of private landlords that do as well, and so we don't believe that there's a real reason to exempt those. The proposed program is a shift from registration to licensing. Most other communities that have a rental program issue rental licenses. The license would be an annual and per unit. There's an exception if you have a multiple tenant building. Then we would do one license for the whole building. License actions could be performed by the building official, which would be probation or revocation with an appeal to the Building Trades Board. Same fee as schedules of rental registration. Also, we would post license status on the city website. The inspections program is voluntary. We would continue exterior and complaint-based interior inspections with a voluntary interior inspections program as well. Best practice units is the incentive program that we're looking at doing, which would be a reduced license fee recognition on the city website and through other media. Would be on for a 3-year cycle, and then you could reobtain after 3 years. So there's been some concern of how long those that would last, and we think 3 years is reasonable. There was some discussion of maybe 5 years, but staff believes that a lot can change in 5 years in the status of a rental. So here's really kind of getting into the meat of it. So you all have seen several proposals of this. This is kind of an outline of what has changed from the September 10th proposal. So we added some language that a license action would not prevent the city from additional enforcement actions. There was some question of, does this replace the municipal court action? And no, it doesn't. This would run on a parallel track with it, but would not replace it. Clarification that the inspection program is an interior-based inspection program. Exterior inspections and complaint-based interior inspections would still continue. We have heard some concerns about maybe the cost of this program, and is the fee too high? Are we putting an unfair burden on landlords? And also, is the incentive program robust enough? And so we've looked at it, crunched some numbers, and we think we could do an increased discount of a 25% to a 50% discount. You're still looking at a $10 discount on a $20 fee, but you know, that is a rather significant discount, and that would continue for the length of the time that the unit is a best practice unit. And then the best practice designation, as I mentioned, would be good for 3 years. And then removing the section pertaining to program termination. So some of the financial impacts, license fees would continue would cover the administrative costs of this program. I put together kind of a rough estimate based on some previous costs of what it would cost administratively. Note that the Planning and Development Department, we're not fully staffed. We're down 1 staff member from when these numbers were previously pulled, so some of these numbers could be a little bit higher. On average, we hired a temporary rental assistant. That was about $12,000. They would basically be the one that would be the front desk, processing payment, answering general questions, things like that. Seasonal code enforcement officer that was brought in typically for 6 months, and the idea was to help with grass complaints and things like that, while John Vetter handled more rental and property inspections. I added planning department staff time because my department staff, I've asked them all, and on average, when we're ramping up this, they're spending about 10 hours of their time answering phone calls, going up and talking with landlords or tenants who have questions that maybe the rental assistant can't answer. So that is time that they can't spend on other planning department duties. Mailing and printing is about $10,000. We've got about 3,000 landlords in the city, so there's quite a bit of cost with that. Portion of Citizen Serve license, our database is housed within our Citizen Serve software. We would have that software anyway, but we think it's fair to allocate some of the costs from this program to that. So roughly, we're talking about $61,000, maybe $62,000 in administrative cost, and that could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less. That was just kind of a back of the napkin estimate based on some of the previous costs that we've had. So
Ryan, one of the commissioners wrote a letter in opposition to this program and listed a budget of $110,000 for this program. Was that maybe just falsely estimated off of 5,500 units at $20 a
Yes.
piece?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. So this would be the actual cost of administering.
It's probably a little bit higher,
Okay.
but that was just me being conservative.
Okay.
But you're probably, it's probably about a $70,000 to $80,000 a true cost when you include
All the internal labor.
all the internal.
Okay.
I mean, that includes paper, that includes all that type of stuff that
Okay.
is kind of a little harder to parse out. So
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. So there is some real cost to this program. I know there was some discussion among this body of fees and are they fair. And one of the other things that I did include in a staff report is a comparison that my staff did on other rental programs in the state of Kansas. And we really are one of the least expensive registration programs. A lot of the other ones are upwards of $50 or $100 a unit. So we are really trying to keep this pretty close to what the actual costs are. This is not a, I hate to use the word moneymaker because the city is not in the business to make money. We're in the business to serve our citizens. But we try to keep this as revenue neutral as possible. So, and then any additional costs we have used to be able to expand some of our other housing programs to landlords, Brush Up Hutch, and some of those other programs. So, that's kind of where any of that delta really is going, is going towards that. So a timeline, if you all decide to move forward with this this morning, would be we would notify landlords of the program immediately. The program would begin on January 1st of 2020. We have an amended license deadline. We went from March to May. That was at some of the comments we had received from landlords that being the year tends to be a little bit more difficult with getting taxes and things like that. So giving everyone an additional 2 months we think is reasonable. And we would work with the Director of Public Information and Community Engagement to prepare educational materials as well as best practice promotion. So, all in all, there's been a lot of controversy around this program. I've been in this position for 6 months now, and it's been one of the biggest things I've been dealing with. But in general, there has been some really good improvements that have happened under the current program, and there is some real concern that if this program goes away, that we'll lose some of that momentum. That being said, I want to be clear that we do have good tools as well in place now that we didn't have when this program was initially put in place. So, while staff does believe that this program does need to continue and there is real value to it, we will certainly adapt, and we'll try to make rental housing improve as much as we can in the city. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you all have, but that wraps up staff's presentation.
Thank you, Ryan. That's very good. And if I can add just a little bit to the history of it, and again, he mentioned at the last meeting on October the 1st, the action that we directed to city staff was motion to direct city staff and housing commission to prepare an ordinance establishing a rental license and inspection program and associated fee structure. That was voted upon 4-1 by this council. I think what I've seen today is you met that requirement that we asked. So I just want to emphasize that was the action that we tasked staff with doing, and they've done so at this point. So if there's any other questions of Ryan.
I had a few questions.
by all means.
There was some conversation about marketing and move-in inspection with checklists that will protect both the landlord and the tenant from false accusations. Do we plan to move forward with that if the ordinance is in place?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's something that we would certainly could offer to landlords. That was, it's kind of interesting that this has come back, because that was initially what staff's proposal was doing something that was based off of, I'm blanking on the city in Missouri.
Grandview.
Thank you, Grandview, which is suburban KC, that was basically doing inspections when the unit was vacant. And when we heard from a lot of landlords as well, that's not really feasible. We can't do that, but we're certainly willing and able to do that, and we want to work with the landlords and do that.
Okay.
And that's part of an overall education program that we're also doing. We're working with the Housing Commission and Human Relations Commission to prepare a landlord-tenant handbook,
Okay.
and that's going to outline those rights and responsibilities that both parties have. And one of those things is that we're going to emphasize is get a move-in checklist. That protects both the landlord and protects the tenant. So this is not being done in a vacuum. This is part of an overall program, really to kind of move the needle and really bring the entire rental housing stock up in the city. So.
Great. The other question I had was about the Buildings Trade Board appeal process. Would that appeal be available to landlords on revocations of license only, or on like certain violations? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. How it's written now, it would only be for the revocation or for a license action. I mean, I guess I'd defer to the city attorney, as the IPMC is part of Chapter 21.
So it would probably be
So I don't know if that's an
an
appealable.
option.
Not to the Building Trades Board, no.
Yeah.
No. Isn't that how? Well, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, I thought I heard you say early in your opening comments that for multifamily, there'd be one license for the entire building.
Mm-hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I thought that the 3 or more, I believe it is, or 4 or more, there's not a license for the entire building, but rather a decreased
Yes.
licensing fee per unit in the structure. Is that correct?
That's correct. So if it was a 100-unit apartment building, we would issue a license for that entire building, and the fee would be based on the $15.
Okay, so the license for the entire,
Yes.
okay,
Uh-huh.
for the entire building, but there still remains a
Yes.
per unit at a reduced fee.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
And I know this would be a guesstimate, and that's even probably a, I don't know, a guesstimate. What, given, I guess what you've heard, should this go into effect, what sort of decrease from that 110,000? Well, I guess it wouldn't be that much because there would be $15 units, but what sort of wild guesstimate do you have in terms of participation, and what kind of dollars decrease might that have?
We have about 98% compliance now with the registration component. That's where the fee was paid and everything. Now, there wasn't a fee paid for 2018, but I think we're right around, and I apologize on the numbers are right in front of me, but I believe we're right around $100,000 is what we actually bring in. So it's,
I don't think I was clear in my question. Assuming there'd be some voluntary inspection of interiors and
Best practice units.
best
I
practice
see what you're
units,
saying, yes.
and achieving that and having the 50%
Mhm.
reduction in fee, what's your wild guess?
From what I've heard from some of the larger landlords who said that they would be like Elite Realty and some of the other ones that said they would probably avail themselves to this. I would say it's probably not unreasonable that we'd have maybe 20%, maybe a little bit more in the best practice. So you extrapolate that out, let's say 1,000 units. So instead of $20, you're at $10. So it would be a savings of a reduction of about $10,000.
Okay.
So.
And the reason I ask is the 110 starts decreasing and coming closer to that number that you had talked about as well. Okay. and this may not be a question for you so much as a question for the inspection department. I know there's been lots of comment about the unknown of what's going to be inspected, or a follow-up inspection, finding things to be repaired, but then also some new inspection sites are made. I'm kind of moving to in my thinking, so I'll toss it out there. Might there be a here's what we're going to be looking at, or for, or whatever type of thing to go out to a landlord? And I'm not just talking about a list of all the
IPMC.
100 or 150 items on the IMPC, but do you follow where I'm going?
Yes, I believe so. So when this program started, we created a little mini list. I think it's on the website, a punch list of main items we're looking for. So if we're talking about our voluntary interior inspections, what we're looking for, and the question of, I don't know if you meant coming back and finding something different.
I'm going on comments received, so the inspection, the voluntary inspection occurs. Here's 5 items that need to be addressed. I call you back for the reinspection. You find that the 5 items are satisfactorily addressed, but you notice that there was a 6th item or a 7th item that you didn't see the last time, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, so one, again, going voluntary interior inspection. I assume we're going to be walking around with the landlord. The unit's going to be vacant. There shouldn't be any tenants, shouldn't be any items inside the unit that would prohibit us from looking at all aspects of it. If that should happen, I would think there would be a good working relationship between the landlord and the inspector. One, being it's voluntary. 2, they want the unit correct. And we're human, so if we miss something the first time and find something coming back to do a final, I think the chances are limited because the unit should be empty. On a occupied unit, we get those complaint calls. Those are a little bit more challenging because people have furniture and all kinds of objects in front of things, and if they call us back or the landlord calls us back, there might be more visible. And even though we never saw it the first time, it doesn't mean we're just going to ignore the issue. So
repeat that last sentence again.
We're not going to ignore the issue. So if we get a complaint and we're looking at it and all their objects, belongings are within the apartment, we're not moving everything away from the walls. We're not diving deep into their personal stuff. We're just looking at what is visible to us. If we get called back by the same tenant, either on their way out when the unit is vacant, or by the landlord to come back in and do a re-inspection, and no belongings and effects and objects are in there, it might show us things that we never saw the first time. We still won't ignore it, but we'll work with that landlord on making those corrections. Our job is still to note the fact: is it compliant? Is it per the property maintenance code, or is it not? So whether we see it day 1 or day 30, it stays the same.
I think that's where a lot of the trust issues come up with. 'Cause I know it's not intentional, but and I know everybody makes mistakes, but we do hear that concern a lot. I'm not sure what we can do to mitigate the chance of that happening.
Part of the complaint that I've heard is we send out photos, and the photos will show an exterior violation code, and then it will talk about painting the exterior of the property. But the photo only showed one side of the property. There's a lot of assumption that the rest of the other 3 sides that look identical to the one side we took a photo of, they don't need to be addressed, and so they paint the one side that we sent the photo of. We're going to add some language to our letters to explain that the photo is an example. It is a one snip of or clip of the rest of the property. If the other 3 sides of the house look like the one we took a photo of, you need to address those sides as well. And that's part of what the belief is of us adding to it. The problem still stays the same. We're not sending 100 photos to our within our cases and violation letters for every single square inch of the property.
Any clarification could help for those reasons. We've heard from individuals that were under the impression they needed to have all their siding repaired, when in reality it was a portion of their siding would have made it satisfactorily compliant. Depend on each unique case.
Some of that, again, they have the ability to reach out to the inspector and actually have them meet them on the property. If they choose not to, and then it's as good as anyone's guess of what they are interpreting that violation to be. We've got his name and number at the bottom of every letter. A lot of people will come in the day before court, and I say, "Did you call and visit with John?" No, I didn't call anybody. So here we're months later and you never reached out once. And so I don't know why they're afraid to call or whatever, but if there's a misinterpretation of one little bit of siding to replace or paint versus the whole entire house, they need to call. They need to understand that he'll meet them there and explain what the violation is. So
I assume that'll be in some of the literature that you're promoting, or would be promoting, excuse me. Okay.
So Ryan, I'm assuming that we're going to have a much more beefed up website presence on this issue, and especially with the best practices piece. I'm not sure how that's going to be displayed. So things like the punch list and all that, the checklist needs to be really easy to access. I'm sure you know all that.
And we're very fortunate to have Rebecca on our staff, and she has been very proactive of really looking at our website, and we're going through some testing right now of it to, because we have heard some complaints that our website's a little difficult to navigate, things like that. So we want to make things clearer. We've got a much more robust social media presence now than we even had a while back. We are beginning to have, I think, good conversations with Jill and her organization, this really is trying to be a collaborative effort. And as I said, this is just one piece of it. This is part of an overarching program and really hopefully cultural change in the community.
Okay. Because of the vote by the Housing Commission, we would need a supermajority, or no?
No, that's only for Planning Commission.
Oh, okay.
I might also add, in my travels, I was in Junction City for a cross-country meet, and we stopped and had lunch at a restaurant, and in there was in their local newspaper, an article about their struggles and their means of trying to address that. And then recently I read that Overland Park is going back to the table looking at their current program and making some tweaks that they learned as they went along. I assume this is somewhat of a living, breathing.
Absolutely.
We'll review it, we'll look at it,
yes,
and see if there's tweaks that are right size for our community, and so on and so forth.
One of the things that I have suggested to the Housing Commission, and working with Jill, as she is the kind of the voice of the landlords, at least the large landlord organization here in the community, is really begin to have better communication with the Housing Commission and things like that about these issues. We do have landlords on the Housing Commission, but I think it's good for, hopefully we can have this relationship where we can hear what their concerns and what their issues are, and we can try to find ways to work together to address them. So yeah, I know this has been an emotional issue and has taken up a lot of time and space in the community, but I'm really appreciative of Jill and the Housing Commission, everybody who's worked very, very hard on this and tried to find something that works. And it's unfortunate that our hands have been kind of tied with the changes in state law, and that's one of the problems of we don't have a very robust incentive program. Because there's not a lot that we can really do in terms of these voluntary inspections, but the hope is that hopefully we can all kind of move in that direction. So,
very good. Any other questions of Ryan? Is there a motion?
I move to approve ordinance 11, residential rental registration and inspection of Chapter 21 of the Code of Hutchinson, Kansas, and substituting Article 11, residential rental licensing and inspection of Chapter 21 of the Code of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Daveline?
No.
Soldner?
Yes.
Iris de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 8A, consider 2020 health and dental insurance renewal.
Tom.
Good morning, Council. Tom Sanders, Human Resources Director, and I'm happy to be with you this morning to talk about our health and dental renewal for 2020. Also in the audience, I've got Aaron Wells and Rick Benz from USI, our consultants, and after I get done, they'll have a few words to talk, maybe a little bit of deeper dive into our renewal, as well as some of the emerging concepts we're looking at to improve care and help control costs in the future. Very happy to report that our first year under a unbundled configuration has gone very, very well, and we're recommending that we continue with Meritain Health as our third-party administrator and Maxor as our pharmacy benefits manager. As we work through the renewal, our overall trending has been really slightly below what was expected for 2019. Our 1250 plan has been running about 99% of expected, and our high deductible plan has been running really well. It's about 67% of expected. Perhaps the most notable trend in all that information is a significant decline in our overall pharmacy spend. Historically, we've been running about 30% of our total spend has been towards pharmacy, and then in the last year it's dropped down to nearly almost 20%. So that's a pretty precipitous drop. And the other important thing I think that goes along with that, you might recall last year we talked about the rebates that Maxor had offered as part of their overall contract with us. We got our first check from them about a week and a half ago, and that was for $50,000, and that was for the first half of the year. We're expecting we'll get probably a second check, about another $50,000 after the year closes. So, so not only have we seen an overall drop in just our per member per month cost, but also that doesn't include the rebates going in on top of that. So that's been really positive. Also, you know, in HR this doesn't happen very often, but we've gotten lots of complaints, or excuse me, not complaints, but positive comments from employees about Maxor and the lower drug costs that they've been experiencing since moving to them. We have, got a few complaints here and there, but really nothing significant at all, and they've been extremely responsive in terms of getting those resolved in a very timely manner. So, very happy with that. On the stop-loss insurance side of things, as part of the renewal process, USI looked at our stop-loss contract and shopped it. And the option that we decided to go with was involved moving our individual stop-loss from 100K to 125K. That's a move we've been contemplating for several years. It's probably pretty much the norm out there. Since our high-cost claimants have really been steady over the years, we decided to go ahead and make that change because we'd be saving about $98,000 in premium cost, and also we would be eliminating about $250,000 of current risk exposure that we have through what's called lasering of some of our high-cost claimants. So overall, it's a better contract. We think it's a very reasonable risk, and just think that's something that makes a lot of sense to do. As we look into the
I'm sorry,
sure,
I'm going to be real honest. I don't understand the difference between the 100 and 125 stop loss. What's the effect on, like, say, our employees? Is there?
Yep. So a member, it could be an employee or a spouse or a child or whatever. Once they hit $100,000, our stop loss insurance kicks in and pays from there on up. What we changed it from was from $100,000 to another $25,000 of risk.
I see.
So.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Our exposure became $25,000 greater.
Right.
Think of it like a deductible.
Exactly. Yeah.
How many on average cases per year, or maybe over the last 5, I'm not sure how far back you can look, have there been losses or expenses, I should say, above, in this case, 100 or now going to 125?
Yeah, we've looked at that pretty extensively, and over the last several years it's been 2. I think the worst year we've ever had was 4, and we've had years where we've had none. So, it's a pretty reasonable risk. I think the average out there for groups of our size runs about 4 or 5. So we've been actually pretty lucky, I think. So again, if you're going to roll the dice on this kind of stuff, which insurance is always that balancing of how much you pay in premium versus how much you assume to take on the risk. This seems like a kind of a no-brainer. We do have high-cost claimants now, and that lasering is, at least $250,000 of pretty much known exposure there that we're getting rid of. So that's a
so
very
that
positive.
alone pays the potential
pretty much
loss difference.
Yeah. When we did the math, it's just like, okay, this is this is the first year where it's really made sense. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, sure, absolutely. You know, so in terms of funding for next year, when we look to the future and look at the market studies and what the industry projections are, they're typically looking at 7 to 7.5% for both medical and pharmacy for next year. And you combine that with our the way our claims trending has been, USI is recommending that the overall increase in premium funding next year should go up by 6.6%. But I talked a little bit earlier about the trending for the two plans that we have. And so based on the way the 1250 plan's been trending, we're recommending that that plan be increased 8% and the high deductible plan be just continued to be flat. Also, when we met with the Health and Dental Committee, we had a lot of conversation around Teladoc. We're going to continue to recommend having that next year. Our overall utilization has been a little bit disappointing, but we're going to continue to promote it during open enrollment and elsewhere, and hopefully we'll see more utilization with that. But if not, it's something that's kind of on the radar screen with the Health and Dental Committee that we may not continue going in maybe in 2021. So
how are you promoting it? Just in the general policy packet?
Yeah, it's a part of our packet that we give it, but also during open enrollment, we spend a good amount of time really talking about it and how it works and how it can, you know, be a benefit to you and your family, whether, you know, it's, you know, you need to go to urgent care, but not necessarily the emergency room, but it's, you know, 12 o'clock at night, and how do I, you know, that kind of thing. Versus,
will this
or if
wait
you got
till
a kid
morning
in
kind of a thing?
Right, or you got a kid in college, and they don't really have their doctors here in Hutch, and they need to, you know, got a sinus infection, and, you know, it just keeps them out of the hospital or the ER. Yeah, the ER. So the people that have used it have great things to say about it. So, and that's part of what we'll probably try to do with open enrollment, is really kind of promote those testimonials and that kind of thing. And we might even try some incentives. We haven't really nailed that down yet. But long story short, I think it's a valuable program. It's just, it's like some things that are new. It's just taking a little time to take root. So, on the dental side of things, that's also gone very well this year. It's our first year with Delta Dental, and it's been running significantly below the projections that we had for this year. And so based on that, we're going to decrease the premiums by 5.1%. That's also with no plan changes. So we've been very excited with that. And those the reduction in cost really seems to be coming from the deeper provider discounts that Delta Dental is able to get from their providers. So it's not that nobody's going to the dentist anymore. It's, you know, it's just actually the discounts are better. So we're really happy about that. In terms of the overall budget impact, during the budget process this last year, the city projected a 6% total premium increase for both health and dental. And based on our demographics and participation right now, that 6.6% total increase that we were talking about would amount to about $219,000 in new funding for 2020. That'll be somewhat offset by the dental premiums that will be going down. That's roughly about $5,000 of city costs that won't have next year. So if you put those two together, that kind of the net increase will be somewhere around $214,000. And as outlined in our budget, the funding for this increase will come out of our unencumbered reserves with Fund 32. So, and if it's okay, if this point, I think I'd have Aaron come up and just talk a little bit more about the renewal and some of the things that we're looking at. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Aaron Wells with USI, and Rick and I thought we had tag team this presentation. I was before you a year ago, but you don't know Rick, so I'll introduce him real quick. Rick worked for a large regional broker, and he ran their operations side for about 16 years, and he's got about 19 years of experience in the business. So I'm going to let Rick cover the first couple pages, and then I'll take the last page, and we'll talk about some new concepts.
Great, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. On the first slide, it kind of talks a little bit about what it was. I'm sorry, the second slide shows the 2019.
Yeah, sorry. Make it go. Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
Okay, so this is just a brief overview. And by the way, we've had a great pleasure in working with Tom and the executive benefits team. They did a phenomenal job, and obviously what you'll see on these next three slides, Tom talked a little bit about. So I'll just pick out a few things, and Aaron will chime in with some stuff too. So overall, Tom told you what the breakdown was for each plan individually and its overall performance. For the plans combined, the overall percentage on a net basis to budget was 93.4%. So anytime you're running below your overall budget, that's a good thing. We had two claimants that did go over the $100,000 specific deductible, which is below average for what we project, on an overall actuarial basis. So that was a good thing. The prescription drug piece, which Tom mentioned, was really, really good landscape this year. A lot of that came through the expertise and our ability to negotiate with Maxor using our preferred prescription drug language that we built into the contract that brought those rebates and that preferred language to the city of Hutchinson, which Tom spoke about how great of an advantage that is for the plan this particular year. The rebate perspective as well, which is playing out good for you guys. On the dental piece, there was considerable savings, like Tom said. A lot of that was driven by the deeper discounts provided by Delta Dental of Kansas. So we were excited about that, and because of that, we were able to lower the cost share for the employees in the next year. One of the other things that we talked about evaluating, if the plan continues to perform like it has, we feel like there's even some strategy to be evaluated, maybe potentially even enriching the benefit on the dental side a little bit better. In some particular areas. So we are excited about potentially evaluating that next year. The last bullet point talks about the Hutchinson Hospital ER physicians to accept Aetna network and not balance bill them. That was something that in our transition over to the new Aetna provider arrangement that we had seen some outliers there. But since then we've gotten those put to bed, and there shouldn't be any issues with that particular landscape going forward. So before we go to the next slide, I'll let Aaron add anything. So really these 4 bullet points, again, Tom covered these in pretty good detail. So the 2020 medical renewal was projected with a 6.6% increase with no benefit changes. I will say that in our business, the art of underwriting an unbundled self-funded renewal is pretty much that. It's not a science, it is an art. So when we do that, part of your renewal projector has margin built in, which is most underwriters, because you're projecting a lot of what you see right now in your claims and projecting that forward, you have to build in what we call sometimes some margin or fudge factor. So at a 6.6%, we actually had 5% margin built in. So even with that much margin, we felt like that the 6.6 was still a good projection for your guys' renewal. The stop loss deductible, like Tom said, it's a year in which what we've evaluated historically to raise that specific stop loss deductible from 100 to 125, which we feel like is going to definitely play out your favor on the fixed cost side. And then the no laser piece we feel is really, really big deal. What we typically don't see out there a lot, and I think this goes a lot back to with USI in our panel of preferred stop loss vendors, is being able just to remove that additional liability that you have today of the $150,000 and $300,000 lasers. Those went away at renewal. You typically don't see that out there in the standard marketplace. So kudos to the USI team and our partnerships with the stop loss carriers to be able to remove those for next year. Teladoc, we talked a little bit about that. The only other thing I'll say that Tom talked a little bit about is the biggest frustration that you'll see when it comes to Teladoc is there are some steps that you have to take to set up your account on your app. So if you're not proactive in setting up your account and you wait till you get sick, what are you likely going to do? You're going to just get even more frustrated and run straight to the emergency room and the urgent care. So some of the initiatives or incentives that Tom was talking about is maybe doing a raffle or something to encourage people to set up their account ahead of time. That way when they do get sick, it's already set up. They'll be more apt to use it and have a good experience in using that particular service. Again, the dental, a huge success with the partnership with Delta Dental. And like Tom said, we were able to reduce by 5% this year and look forward to evaluating other benefits, richer benefits next year. Aaron, was there anything else?
I don't think so.
I'll let Aaron talk about the last slide.
Any questions on lasers? That's sometimes a confusing concept.
Talk to that, please.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's a little bit like waiting till your house is on fire to call State Farm and try to get insurance. Just it doesn't really work very well at that point. So when you're out in the stop-loss market and you're shopping for a new carrier, they're going to look at existing, known, ongoing, large claimants. They're going to say, hey, we're in the business of accepting unknown risk, not known risk. So they will typically put an exclusion on that individual. It doesn't mean that their coverage is changed in any way. It just means that the plan sponsor, you, are accepting more risk because the stop-loss carrier already knows about that person. So when we marketed your stop-loss this year, you had 2 historical lasers that we were able to get removed from the plan, and we were also able to get a guarantee from the stop-loss carrier that next year at this time, if there's a large ongoing known claimant, your contract will not allow the stop-loss carrier to put a laser on that individual. So, if we've got preemie triplets, at this time next year, they can't put an exclusion on those triplets. So it gives you protection on a go-forward basis. So some interesting things in the market that we're at least evaluating and trying to stay current with and seeing if it's appropriate for your plan. We're seeing some cash payment surgery and imaging networks start to come to the market. We're working with a company based out of Wichita called Fair Market Health, and they've developed a pretty extensive list of providers in the Wichita area that are willing to accept less than what the insurance company would normally pay because that network provides them with 100% cash payment very quickly, and they don't have to chase members down to try to get deductibles and coinsurance collected, which has become a pretty big problem for physicians' offices, hospitals, et cetera. As deductibles have gone up, in the last 10 years, patient collections is a big issue for doctors' offices and providers. So what we're seeing is these networks, these cash payment networks, companies like Fair Market Health, companies like Zero Card is another one that's starting to come into Kansas, negotiating some really aggressive rates that would save both the health plan money and it would save the member money. Right now, there's no providers in Hutchinson that are on that list, but we're introducing these companies to some Hutchinson providers to see if they would be willing to participate in this type of a network arrangement. So that's something we're looking at. The next 2 bullet points really revolve around a program that was formulated with the University of Arkansas a few years ago. And the brief history on this is the Surgeon General for the state of Arkansas, who's in charge of all of the state employees, went to the head of the pharmacy school at the University of Arkansas, which I guess they have a pretty reputable pharmacy school, and said, gosh, these prescriptions are killing us. What can we do? And so the University of Arkansas put together this program that does 2 things. First of all, in their research, what they found was a lot of times specialty drugs, which are typically infusible or injectable, they run about $50,000 a year on average. They're very expensive drugs. That they are approved at a rate that a lot of times doesn't make sense, and they're approved without enough attention to other drug interactions, to the genetics of that person taking that drug. And the history it involves some of the approvers financially benefiting from the approval of that drug. So they're getting a kickback from some pharmacies in this case if they approve a high-costing medication. So by carving that responsibility of approving and researching the appropriateness of a specialty medication, taking that away from the pharmacy benefit manager, giving it to a totally independent third party who's not financially vested in the approval of that medication made a lot of sense, and it saved the state of Arkansas a ton of money. And so you've got a truly independent third party here in the University of Arkansas Pharmacy School really digging deep and evaluating the appropriateness of that medication. And they've also got a couple physicians on staff that assist in that process. So that's something that we're looking into. The second piece that the Surgeon General of Arkansas and that they worked out with the pharmacy school is what I would call something like a reference-based price within a drug therapeutic category. So take the category of proton pump inhibitors. So these are drugs that treat acid reflux or GERD. They're drugs like Prilosec. What are some others, Rick? There's another one, real common when you can get it over the counter.
Zantac.
Yeah, Zantac's another one. Anyway, there's a bunch of different there's a bunch of different drugs in that category. Well, a new one was introduced recently called Duexis. Duexis is a combination of two over-the-counter drugs that have been reformulated, repatented, and packaged into an $800 a month prescription for two over-the-counter drugs, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. So what they've done is they've evaluated the efficacy of all drugs within a therapeutic category, and they said, well, if there's no clinical difference between the drugs, why are we paying $800 a month for a drug that has no better clinical outcome than an over-counter the drug that could be purchased for $5 or $10 or whatever? So the program sets up kind of a limit of how much the plan will pay within any particular therapeutic category. And they've evaluated about 30 different categories of drugs and set maximums in each category, again, based purely on independent research about the clinical efficacy of the drugs in that category. And so we're seeing clients that have implemented that program, generic utilization goes way, way up, and drug costs go way, way down. So we're trying to see if that would be appropriate for your health plan. And then we also have on our agenda next year to evaluate some of your other products that we've not really, or insurance coverages that we've not really dug into yet, such as your cancer, critical illness, and accident plans, as well as your life, voluntary life, and voluntary short-term disability plans. We'd like to take those out to the marketplace and just see if there's a better deal out there somewhere. So a little bit of history, a little bit of future.
I had one question about the independent prior authorization. That wouldn't be a situation where someone would be required to try less expensive drugs before the more expensive drug was authorized, would it? I mean, I've heard a lot about that.
Yeah, so good question.
Mm-hmm.
The way that program would typically work is we would, if we rolled it out and we determined it was appropriate and everybody agreed, if you're on an existing specialty medication, you would not be required to go backwards and try something else. The concept that, the name of the concept you're describing in our industry is called step therapy. So we would not require step therapy for somebody that was already on a specialty medication. But new entrants to the plan or new prescriptions for a specialty med, step therapy would be evaluated for appropriateness. So.
And by appropriateness, you mean if the clinical outcomes were the same for a less expensive drug? I mean, they'd have to be the same, though. It wouldn't be like less effective.
Right.
They wouldn't have to jump through hoops to get the most effective option, would be my only concern.
Right. So, for example, rheumatoid arthritis, from what I know about it, obviously I'm not a clinician, but Humira is a $60,000 a year drug, but it's one of the few drugs that really work. So we're not going to mess around with something like that and make somebody try some drug that doesn't have the clinical effectiveness of Humira. But there's other illnesses or chronic conditions where there are decent alternatives that we would ask somebody to try first.
Great. Thank you.
You mentioned short-term disability. Are you guys in the space for the long-term disability or long-term care avenues? I don't know that we offer that voluntarily or otherwise.
Long-term care, we don't. Long-term disability is covered through the CAPER system and KPNF system.
It
So,
is.
yeah.
Okay,
so
okay. And I guess I should differentiate the two.
Yeah, so the short-term disability really is meant to be that gap filler
Bridge,
between,
yeah.
sick leave and when long-term disability might kick in.
Would
So,
kick in, okay.
Yeah.
Then I guess I go back to the long-term care question. Is that within your repertoire?
It is. But boy, the market on that has changed so dramatically in the last 10 years. And I don't know of any carrier in the market today that's really offering a true group, good, long-term care policy. What we've seen is a shift to a life insurance policy that has an endorsement that looks and smells and feels and sounds exactly like long-term care insurance. In fact, I just, for my wife and I applied for something like that last week. So I think that's going to be kind of how that industry moves forward, is endorsing a life insurance policy. And so we've had some groups that have taken that on as an employee benefit and offered it to their employees. And so that's something we could certainly look at.
Okay. And maybe you would include that in the life or voluntary life as a rider to the life policy?
Yes, an option.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Yep.
The only other question I had was about the Hutch Regional ER doctor gap situation. So from what my understanding, that has all been remedied?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
And we've just finished, what, our first year with you?
This would be
Or
the
are we-
end of the second year.
End of the second
Yeah.
year.
Is it second? Yeah.
Time flies when you're having this much fun.
Right. And certainly, I mean, first year, there were good savings. Second year, again. Third year, you're talking about probably some good savings again and having some plans. I hope it keeps going, but at some point, you kind of hit whatever you want to call it, the floor or the seat, one way or the other. Where you're doing a good job. That's great. But when do you think this is kind of going to plateau out, I guess?
I'm fond of a quote by an economist named Herbert Stein, and he stated the obvious when he said, "If something can't go on forever, it will stop."
I like that.
Somebody paid him a lot of money for that, probably.
Right.
You know, that's a good question. I cannot believe the amount of innovation that's going on in healthcare right now. And if you had asked me that question 5 years ago, I'd say, yeah, it's going to stop sometime. We're going to run out of ideas and solutions, and at some point we're just going to have to face the music and pay more. But man, I just keep seeing all these interesting ideas come down the pike. And fortunately, we're attached to a large national organization that we share we have a platform where we share information regularly and freely. And so we're kind of, tapped into what's going on all over the country. And I don't know, I think employers have reached this frustration and this limit where they're just done. And so it's forcing a lot of innovation in healthcare. So I'm optimistic that we can keep finding solutions that reduce or at least limit cost increases. I wouldn't have thought that 5 years ago.
Well, I think it's fantastic. I don't know, I don't recall, Tom, you're necessarily citing a number, but we've got to be talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars
Yeah, I was just trying to think.
saved or not spent
Right. For sure.
from where we were over 2 years ago.
Yeah, and you might remember last year, we actually reduced premiums 3.8%. So we've got 2 solid years of where we're significantly under trend. So that's really the first time in my career that's ever happened, so. Yeah.
What's our participation rate, Tom, in the overall insurance?
Yeah, so we are probably running about 90% participation rate.
90?
Yeah,
That's
and of that 90%, 80% are in that 1250 plan, and about 20% are in the high deductible plan.
Okay.
So, which is kind of typical. So, yeah.
Is the high deductible plan, I'm not sure who to address it to, but is it a more efficient or economical, I'm not sure what words to put in there, than the I guess the conventional, what you call 1250.
Yeah, it is. If you look at total out-of-pocket cost exposure, it's less than the 1250 plan. Not by a ton, but $1,000 or so, if my memory serves me correctly. Maybe double that if you're talking family coverage. But I think the biggest thing that's probably the barrier to bigger participation there is just the cash flow that some employees have. So if you can afford to pay that first, $3,000 or whatever the deductible is for your situation, then it's a better deal. But that's a little bit of a barrier for a lot of folks. Or they're just, maybe they have it, but that's just not where they want to have their risk exposure, so.
How much of a better deal is it for the employee and or the employer in terms of premiums and the like?
The overall premiums are pretty, it's significantly less.
For a family, I was noticing about
Yeah.
$100 plus a month.
Yep.
See, where am I?
Right.
160. So pretty darn significant.
Yeah, it's again, if you can afford to cash flow it between the money you're saving in premiums and the overall out-of-pocket expense, it's really a better deal for you. But again, I think it's kind of like what we talked about with Teldoc. Some habits die hard. Everybody's used to, I've got a copay and I've got a deductible to meet and all that, and so that's a little bit more comfortable to them and more familiar to them. But we, kind of like Teledoc, we spent a good portion of our time during open enrollment really talking about the plans themselves and, getting people to think about those. And
Does the city see a comparable or improvement in cost? Am I looking at this right? Yeah, we do. 200, well, no, not as much as the employee, but still $120 or so per employee per month.
Yep.
So are we marketing that, so to speak?
Yep. We do.
Incentivizing it in some fashion?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And you can look at our contribution percentages for between the two plans, and certainly it's if you're on the high deductible plan, the city's proportionally from a percentage-wise is paying more.
More of it, okay.
Yeah.
And that of course would account for a good portion of, or some of at least, the employees' savings.
Right, wrong, or indifferent, we decided years ago when we first offered the high deductible plan to really put more emphasis on keeping the premium cost down for the employee versus making contributions to like a health savings account. So kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but we thought it'd be easier to understand for employees to see it more on the premium side of things.
Okay. Keep up the good work.
Appreciate it.
Are we
Can we
ready?
take a break?
I was going to suggest the same. Let's go ahead and move on this item, and then we'll take a short break afterwards.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
Yeah, I will move to approve the proposed 2020 health and dental program and authorize staff to execute the group health and dental insurance contracts with Meritain and Delta Dental for the 2020 plan year.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. I showed 10:42 by my iPad. If we can maybe limit it to 5 minutes or try to, that'd put us at 10:47. And we'll return to business at that
I
time.
was gonna skip, and then I woke up and I felt a lot better than I did yesterday. I didn't think I was gonna get out of bed.
You were ill. I believe we're on the next item.
Item 8B, consider request to demolish a structure at 541 East Avenue A.
Morning, is it still morning? Mayor
Still
and
morning.
council?
Still morning, Aaron.
Okay. Well, I've lost my spot since our break, so I have to pull
Oh, we can
my-
put you at the end of the agenda.
Oh,
There you go.
geez.
No.
Poor Jim.
No, that's
After
not-
you.
That's not the right item.
This is the wrong presentation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-oh. Mouse is- Hold on. I should have come up here and looked at it. I'm sorry, IT. I see you moving the
Right.
mouse back there.
Wonderful when it works.
Yep. The servers.
We've been waiting for you to return, Mr. Manager.
You guys, I think you'd be done with that item already.
Right.
I copied and pasted it into that. Here we
We
are.
can just-
We're all set.
There you go.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. Thank you.
I have
524 East First.
We'll go off of this.
541.
Are
is
we
the
looking for
first item.
541?
These are in the wrong order. I went in the order of my numbers.
There you go.
Okay,
There we go.
here we are.
541, yeah.
541 East Avenue A, this is a request to demolish the property. The owner is Forrest Tenant of Tenant Homes. His representative, Jim Gilliland, is here. He's been very patient through the whole meeting to answer any of your questions. This is in the Houston Whiteside District. It's a contributing structure. It was built in 1928. This is a later built home in the neighborhood. It's I don't know my architecture terms, but it is not an example of your Victorian or Italianate and earlier construction. Here's the home in question. There was a fire in May of this year. It was in the Hutch News. They got a very interesting picture with the flames and everything. But this is where it's at now. We have a tarp on the roof. Forrest has gone through and done to see if he was able to salvage it, because it is a cute home. We had a member of the Landmarks Commission who's in that neighborhood who said a lot of people were sad to see this one go the way it has, but you can't control acts of God. So the Landmarks Commission made a determination they cannot approve demolitions of structures because that will damage or destroy historic features in the district. But you are the body that has been given the authority by the state to grant appeals to those requests, and really it's whether or not there are any feasible or prudent alternatives to the proposal by the applicant. We'll begin with technical issues. So the applicant has provided the photos, and we had a brief field trip there to look at them. And while most, with the right budget, any problems can be overcome on a property. However, the cost repairs nearly matches the value of the home, and that's usually where you're starting to question: is this really a sound investment? Especially if you are a landlord or a property manager, you're not as aficionado of 1920s homes. So there's no feasible or prudent alternative according to staff on this project. For design issues, as is the case with anything in a historic district, and with this, how deteriorated this property is, there aren't a lot of features that can be salvaged, and a lot of the research are things that are available, especially in those homes in the district like this one, that are not prominent historical homes like those of Houston Whiteside or the Carey family or any other historic dignitary that have those large homes. They're more working class housing. We don't have a lot of information on those homes other than, if it's a mail order property, then maybe there might be something in an archive somewhere in Sears or something. But so there really is no feasible prudent alternative as far as the home itself. But within the district, keeping the home in the district is ideal because it maintains the rhythm of the neighborhood. As you start to remove the teeth, the neighborhood starts to look a little sick, much like humans. So as far as relationship to the community plan, this home is adjacent to a land bank property. So if it were demolished, it is in line with the strategy 2.1A1, which says develop targeted demolition plan and maximize reuse of properties. This property would be beneficial to the community as a vacant lot because it's adjacent to a property already owned by the land bank, and Forest Tenant has shown interest in donating this property. We've had conversations with my other hat as a land bank manager to donate that to the city as a land bank property if this property were to be approved, the project were to be approved. Economic issues, this is where it gets a little bit complicated. So based on the inspection of the photos provided by Mr. Tennant, many of the original defining features, oh, that's design, I'm sorry. Economic. So he has provided a quote providing the expected cost to bring the structures to livable standards. He has estimated about $30,000, but that does not account for following Secretary of Interior standards, which that probably would bring it up a little bit more because wood windows and things are going to be more expensive than vinyl or metal. But the damage to the structure is extensive, and there probably be additional costs as well because with any project it's going to be more expensive, especially with something like this that has a lot of fire and water damage because you had to use water to put out the fire and there's holes in the roof. It's currently assessed at $40,000. I'm trying to get to here we are. I kind of included a calculation of those different where he would still have equity in the property if he were to make the needed repairs, but he would be at a greater loss if he did do the repairs. So this is a mixed bag for staff based on the data that he gave us. We weren't able to give a definitive yes or no on this. Maybe we'll have more details from his representative, but staff are kind of on the fence with this one. So you have a choice in the motion. You can either grant the appeal or uphold and deny the issuance of a demolition permit. And that is my presentation. Any questions?
Any questions for staff? I would be remiss if I didn't ask Jim to, he's patiently sat there, if there's anything you'd like to add.
I haven't been to the council meetings in a long time. It's been very informative.
There you go. You may never be back after that.
And I've worked with the Landmarks Commission in this Houston Whiteside District before, and there are some frustrations with it, as this group well knows.
Yep.
And the costs of replenishing, repairing, and restoring are the problem here. And this property was underinsured, and I don't know exactly why, but the insurance proceeds are not going to cover the expense of the repairs and the required restoration. So it's an economic issue. And I'm on the Land Bank Commission as well. And it is next to a lot, and he has assured me that he's going to donate this after he pays for the demolition. The city does not pay for this demolition, and I know you have to pay for quite a few annually. This will be paid for by him, and it will be donated to the land bank, and it makes a wider lot. This is a very desirable neighborhood on this street, and I would hope that maybe we can entice somebody to develop a property here that would be representative of the neighborhood.
With our revised setbacks and a much larger lot, I think it would be more conducive to that.
Be more in the center of the lot.
Yeah.
Very much.
How wide is this property as well as how wide is the land bank property?
I think this is, Aaron, where are you? It's 25 foot?
30 foot. Yeah.
30
This is a
foot.
30 foot.
And next door seems a little wider.
It's a 50-footer.
50 and 30.
So it'd be 80 feet. Be a nice combined lot.
Be a larger lot, much more accommodating of somebody building something there.
Any other questions of Jim?
I had one question of Aaron, or maybe it's a question for Amy. Out of curiosity, are rentals required to have fire alarms?
Yes.
Smoke detector.
Smoke, well,
Or
not
s-
fire alarm.
I'm not.
Smoke
That's
detectors,
what I
yeah.
meant. I don't know why I said a fire alarm. Smoke detectors.
Yes.
Yes, they are.
Yes.
I just noticed in the Hutch News article that Chief Beer had mentioned that he used this as an example as a reminder that people need to have working smoke detectors. So, yeah, I was just curious. I thought that was a requirement, but I guess without interior inspections, we're not
Trent is nodding yes.
able to see if they have them. So,
And just having them, as Chief will point out, isn't, if you don't remember to change the batteries on them, if they're not
Right,
hardwired.
it may not be working.
Then they're
Yeah.
little to no value, just sitting up
true,
there.
true. Well, we were lucky that a cyclist saw this on fire and the two children and adult could get out. So, I would move to grant the appeal of the Landmarks Commission determination and authorize the issuance of a demolition permit for 541 East Avenue A based upon a finding that there is no feasible and prudent alternative to the project.
Second.
Moved and seconded, please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Light?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Next item, if you would,
Thank
please.
Thank you.
Jim, there's more.
Yeah.
As a senior citizen of Hutchinson, this is a very good commission, not just because of how you voted, but because I've been here a lot, and this is a good commission. I hope you all get reelected.
Well, thank you,
Thank
Jim.
you.
I appreciate it.
Have a good day, Jim.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
Item 8C, consider request to demolish structure at 524 East First Avenue.
More of the same?
Yep.
Yeah.
Aaron Barlow, hello. We're tearing down the whole neighborhood, it seems.
Oh, no.
Really, this is just a result of enforcement and neglect. We had a similar case for you last month, right next door at 522 East First Avenue with Sebastian Caudillo. That property was also in severe disrepair. And this is a similar case. The property is owned by C&M Enterprises. Cynthia Wesley is the representative. She does flip homes. She thought she could do the same thing with this one. She bought it for $1. Is she here today? No, she's not here today. But she bought it for $1 and soon found that the needed upgrades were more than her budget. She had some other things come up as well. So she's been working with the inspections department and has signed the property over for demolition. This is a similar story where there's been long conversations with the judge, and I think if you have any questions about the case itself, I think Trent can answer those questions. But where the judge has kind of said, either fix it or tear it down. This one was built in 1905. It's an older home, and at its time, and during its peak, it was probably a very beautiful building. I don't have any photos of. Well, so here's what it looks like.
Yeah.
And there's photos in your packet as well. I apologize that I reduced them, I think, 3 or 4 times, and they still were way too big. So the Landmarks Commission did deny this, just like all demolition requests. And we go through the same process. That there are 4 things to consider to know if there's any feasible, prudent alternative. As far as technical issues, this property is beyond repair. Quite honestly, negligence has left it to a point where it needs to come down unless somebody wants it as a passion project. But that it is not a safe structure, and that's the judge agrees, the code enforcement officer agrees. I think even the property owner has come to that realization. Design issues, again, this is that same issue with before. We can do some research and find information about these types of homes, and I'm sure there's somebody in the community that has information about this property, but to know what type of windows need to be put in there, what materials need to be used for those design issues that come with the Secretary of Interior standards of rehab. it's a very difficult and expensive process that really there is no feasible or prudent alternative to the demolishing. Relationship to the plan, really it's a building that needs to be condemned and brought down. It meets the comprehensive plan again with that targeted demolition plan. And these are, over time, this area might be an area of we want to target with a future grant or a project because there's a lot of vacant lots on the north side of First Avenue.
So is this going to make 4 on that block?
I think so. There might be more.
That's a shame.
Yeah. And actually, maybe it might be the right time to bring up kind of the question about the district itself and the number of contributing properties within the district. We've spoken to the state in the past about redrawing the lines of what happens when we reach a certain threshold, and that is when 50% of the properties are non-contributing or are not contributing, either demolished, non-contributing, or some other status that isn't contributing, then that district needs to be reassessed. We would likely go through the process of creating a new district. We've worked with the Landmarks Commission and the neighborhood to see if that district, we could basically start from the beginning and reestablish the district as a new Houston White Slides or Sugar Mill or whatever you want to call it district, with smaller boundaries that emphasize the homes that really do
Contribute.
need to be preserved and those that are working class homes that have seen historic regulations kind of inhibit the use by property owners. We are at 95 before these two that I've brought to you today. If these are approved, we'll be at 93, and 92 is below 50%.
Okay.
There are 185 properties or
Structures?
features in the district. That includes parks, and they actually include the strip on First Avenue as an item.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
The median.
So the next one that comes in, we'll start the work with the Landmarks Commission and working with the state to come up with a plan for that. In fact, we might begin that now. I'll see what they want to do. And we've been talking with Katrina Ringler, and they're prepared to help us through that process.
Yeah, and that's something that needs to be looked at seriously.
Economic issues, again, the owner, Cynthia Wesley, did provide an estimate by Miller Home Builders. That estimate was $150,000. I mean, that's a lot higher than Forest Tenant's estimate on their property. The truth is probably somewhere in between. But it's still considerably more than I can't remember how much this one is valued, but it's less than the other home.
That's probably not even considering to the standards of the.
Oh yeah, that's before any standards being considered for the keeping windows.
Yeah. Okay.
Maintaining historic features and being able to. We are very flexible. If they were getting tax credits, there'd be much stricter standards, but there's still a lot to be considered when you're in the historic district. So there really is no feasible or prudent alternative. That's basically it, and the motions are the same as the previous item.
Okay.
I'd just like to make a few comments, really no questions. I simply want to redraw our attention to comments that I made, I think, a month ago. I think it was the first meeting of October, where we overrode Landmark and the neighbors of this house. I also want to remind us that given that we're so close to the tipping point, and there's no doubt in my mind we'll hit the tipping point, that had we as a council earlier, about 3 years ago, not made some decisions to allow some exterior windows and siding, we wouldn't be this close to it. But those actions were taken, and in combination with the houses that had deteriorated, we're at where we're at. I would venture a guess that we'll have something akin to the rental inspection / rental licensing swell when we go to looking at redrawing, and not just simply redrawing, but it'll be a whole new redesignation. And that's unfortunate. I simply lament, and I'll again, my comments from last meeting were having to do with what we can do in a proactive, and I just hope, Aaron, through your efforts, Brian, I know you're out there, you are, and I'll probably talk to the new city manager down the road, that what we can do to be proactive. But again, I think that it's inevitable that the Houston Whiteside District, as it now exists, because there will be something, will be taken out of being certified historic because of the 50% threshold. We'll cross that bridge and we'll deal with that. But I would hope that we keep those kind of things in mind, unless there's really no individual interest or concern on the part of my fellow council members about historic structures and maintaining historic neighborhoods and that kind of thing.
No, but I think, Steve, all of us would recognize that that district was too big.
Oh, I'm not arguing against that at all.
And
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, but even if the district would disappear, if someone has a house which they feel is historic, they can apply to the state to have it put on the state register and then move it on up to the national. So you could still have a home in the district that was historic that would qualify for tax credits, even if the district itself goes away.
Correct. If you
So-
wanted to look into that. And
Yeah.
all these homes, they have their historic
Right.
red
Designation.
designations already
Yeah.
written down, so it would not take a lot of work on the property owner's part to get that property
Yeah.
listed. If tax credits are a tool, and we found that the city is very quick to use, citizens in this town are quick to use them for commercial properties. The downtown districts have been very successful with this.
Not for residential.
Not for residential,
Yeah.
but the tools are there, and I went to the seminar and we talked. The state explained, like, if you've got an open application, you can amend that as you get new. Your furnace goes out. You just add that to your application, and every 5 years, 1 year of your costs are being paid for by state tax credits.
So even if the boundaries are redrawn, those left outside the boundaries still have the opportunity to
Yeah,
participate.
or if, as Steve is postulating, the drive, or the swell was to completely eliminate the district. What I'm saying is that even if the district were eliminated, individual homeowners would still have access to the tools that Aaron's referring to.
Correct. And Silver Home's already listed on the state
Yeah.
and national register individually in the district.
So, yeah. So while it changes some things, it still preserves some. So, anyway.
And that's how Hyde Park is. I mean, you could say it's a very historic district as well,
Yeah.
and most of those homes are listed individually, locally on the state and the national register.
But not as a district.
Correct.
Is there a motion on the,
Yes, I will move to grant the appeal of the Landmarks Commission determination and authorize the issuance of a demolition permit for 524 East First Avenue based upon a finding that there is no feasible and prudent alternative to the project.
Second?
it's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Iris de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 8D, consider approval of final plat for Silver Rock Addition.
Good morning, Amy Allison, Senior Planner, and I hope to make this very short. So before you, we have a final plat request for Silver Rock Addition, which is a currently unplatted property located to the south of the mall. And when we get the presentation, we may get to see a photo of it. So currently the applicant is actually Janet Trump with Caw Valley Engineering out of Junction City, but we do have the property owner, Kendall Schoenrock, with the Kansas Development Corporation in attendance to answer any questions you may have. The property, like I mentioned before, is located on 11th Avenue, but is a vacant lot to the south of the mall. It, for whatever reason, was never platted in the past, and as Kendall came to talk about his site plan application, we recognized that they would need to plat, so they quickly put together this preliminary and final plat for us, which hopefully we'll see in a minute. Outside of that, there we go. Thank you, IT. Okay, there is the subject property there. The applicant has proposed a preliminary plat where they are only platting one lot and one block, as you can see there. And they've also generously provided the proposed building on the preliminary plat so you can understand where the site layout of this lot before they've actually gotten approval. The preliminary plat was reviewed by staff, and the Planning Commission was found to be in conformance with the Hutchinson subdivision regulations. That has been provided in your staff report, so if you have any questions about that, please feel free to ask me. And then today you guys are finalizing the review of the final plat of the Silver Rock Edition. Again, this has been reviewed by staff and the Planning Commission, and both found that the plat is in conformance with the subdivision regulations for the city of Hutchinson. Here's a closer look at that lot, just in case you wanted to ask any specifics about the lot in question. And then some photographs. So this is the property looking east along the southern property line. This is kind of looking to the southeast. This is the northern property line looking east, and then this is looking to the northeast. Again, it's just a vacant lot. As far as our records indicate, it has never been developed. And then just some more general photos of the area. As mentioned, the Development Review Committee met on October 8th. No comments were received in regards to these requests. The Planning Commission reviewed the case on October 22nd. Again, no public comments were received. Thus, the Planning Commission recommended approval on a vote of 8-0. And so that leads to staff's recommendation is to accept and approve the recommendation of Planning Commission in regards to the Silver Rock Edition. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. If not, also Kendall is here too. So
I have a question. Looking at the final plat as one lot, is there a feasible way to potentially split that? And if so, how would that process work?
yes, that was brought up in discussion really early on. There may be an intention to split the lot in the future, and we're looking at a north-south lot split down the center.
North-south?
North-south, yeah.
Split
So you can see those little hatched lines along the frontage on 11th there. You'll see there's, that's traffic control essentially, and you'll see there's two openings, and those are essentially driveway openings where they would be approved to place new driveways onto 11th Avenue.
That would be on 11th?
That would be on 11th. So you can see there's one on the west side of the lot that is for the proposed office that will be going on the site, and then there's one on the east side, which would be potentially if the lot were to be split for an additional development to occur on the east side. So
I should know the answer to this question, but right now it does not come to mind. Where do we have a 3-lane or 4-lane in that area?
I believe it is actually 4-lane and with a central turn lane.
So it's 4 plus center lane?
Yeah.
Okay.
Brian's shaking his head.
I think it expands.
It narrows when you get to the railroad. Yeah, when you get to the railroad.
Railroad's where it squeezes down, right? Yeah.
So maybe the developer can respond to this. Is there a project being planned for this property?
There is a project already that has completed its site plan review process. It is the Office for the Department of Children and Family Services that is moving from South Hutchinson to Hutchinson. as mentioned, they've already went through site plan approval and they've received that, so they're ready to go.
What might that footprint look like?
That was shown on the preliminary plat.
All right.
You see that building outline kind of in the center?
Yeah.
Right under.
It's got access from the street.
From
From
the
11.
services the mall as
And then
well.
also the private drive around the
Private
mall.
drive, yeah.
Yes.
You sat patiently. Is there anything you'd like to add? And if so, please approach the podium, and you're not obligated to. So,
I'm kind of curious, what happened to the prairie dogs?
Oh, I wasn't going to bring those up.
were they in
Please
that?
don't
I don't
tell
really
me.
think there's very many prairie dogs on this side. It's the vacant lot that's to the east there.
You know, you're right.
Yeah,
That's right. It is
I
the
don't
one
see
further
any.
east, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not seeing any prairie dog homes, so I think they're good.
So the property would be owned by this ex-developer out of Junction City, is that correct? You're the owner, and that you are entering into a lease with the state of Kansas, is that correct? On the
That's correct. I have a signed lease agreement with the state of Kansas.
Perfect. If you would mind giving your name, please.
Sure. Kendall Schoenrock, Junction City.
Nice to meet you.
What do those leases look like as far as length of lease and so on?
This is a 15-year lease with a 5-year option to renew.
A 15-year with 1 5-year option to renew.
Correct.
Okay.
And I don't know if this is to you or someone else in the room. So property taxes, it's privately owned, so that you're responsible for property tax. Does the improvement of the property then become part of the property tax valuation?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the building adds.
So there's a value here, an added value, right? Good.
Good.
Because it's not state-owned.
And your time schedule, sir?
I'd like to move as quickly as possible.
There you go.
I'd like
Well,
to
there's
get concrete
already
down.
some work going on out there.
Yeah, I'm sprinting to get concrete down before the winter.
Yeah, there's some preliminary work going
assuming
on.
we can avoid a hard freeze, I'd like to move quickly. You know, the DCF is anxious to move in.
What would the elevation appear physically? Is it
It's a single
a brick
story-
fascine?
Yes, single story slab on grade. I think the peak of the roof is about 31 feet. Brick veneer.
Brick veneer?
It'll be very similar to the DCF facilities that we own in Chanute, Hayes. We're building one in Independence currently. It'll be a Bordeaux brick with a blonde soldier force.
What kind of a workforce does that facility support?
I'm not sure. It's probably close to 90,
Really?
parking for 120.
Really?
Well, they've got a facility in South Hutchinson they're
South
relocating,
Hutchinson.
correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good.
Perfect. All right. Any other questions or
Thank you.
entertain a motion?
I'd motion to accept the Planning Commission recommendation. Am I on the right?
To approve the final
Yeah.
plat.
To approve the final plat, yes.
Yeah.
There, I
That
lost
is
my-
kind of hard to read.
Yeah,
all that
right.
stuff in there.
Second.
Approve the final plat. Yeah.
All right. Linda, I heard a motion and a second. If you'll call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave-Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Cyrus Dicker-Ballo?
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 8E, consider agreement with Sunflower Ag for services
Thank
related
you.
to
Thank
you.
dewatered municipal
Happy reading.
biosolids.
Somebody's phone's up here.
Yeah. Phone. I think.
Kendall?
Kendall.
All right. Good morning. My name is Brian Clinton. I'm the Director of Public Works. The City of Hutchinson Wastewater Treatment Facility processes and treats about 5 million gallons of wastewater every day. And from that treatment process, we generate almost 6,000 wet tons of biosolids. And those biosolids are land applied to approximately 600 acres of farm ground. Part of that farm ground's owned by the city. Part of that farm ground's owned by a private individual. Sunflower Ag has been the city's contractor for the biosolids handling and application since 2011. And their current one-year contract expires at the end of 2019. City staff has been very pleased with the service that Sunflower Ag has provided, and we are recommending a 3-year agreement with Sunflower Ag for the removal, transportation, land application, and management of our dewatered biosolids. The proposed agreement with Sunflower Ag is for $20 per wet ton, and we're estimating that to be about $115,000 for 2020. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
I one, I have to bite my tongue whenever we're talking about biosolids. So many jokes jump right in the ready. But anyways, no, I had visited with the city manager, and I had seen that other cities, and I think he said he was going to put you onto this, found a way to monetize it, not only not making an expense, but actually generate revenue by selling it. I don't know that we have the facilities currently in place to do so, but what do you know about that? What are they doing differently than, say, we are?
Yeah, and I did. Thanks for giving me the heads up
Right.
on that. So they are producing what's called a Class A biosolids.
Okay.
Our biosolids are Class B biosolids. And
B
so
as in boy?
B as in boy, yeah. And so the Class B biosolids have some pathogens still in it.
Okay.
The Class A the pathogens are virtually eliminated. So it can be used for the public. It can be used on golf courses. It could be used in gardens, in nurseries. Our biosolids still have some pathogens in it. So the only thing it can be used for is spread on agricultural fields for
You
use
would
as fertilizer.
take additional equipment or processes
It
to
would.
get from a B to an A.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, that's a great question. And it is something that we looked at when we did our facility master plan for the wastewater treatment facility. And our consultant talked to the EPA about would there be some benefits for taking our Class B biosolids to the Class A biosolids. And the EPA said if you've got a way to dispose of Class B biosolids, it really doesn't make financial or economic sense to go to the additional processing that it takes to convert that B biosolids to A biosolids. Okay. So
in other words, even if we're paying $115,000 a year, it would be more expensive for us to have created the.
That's right. There's some disinfection, some additional dewatering and drying of that biosolids. There's additional processing to go from the B to the A.
Well, and in my studies, I found that certain cities, I think Fort Wayne, Indiana was one, but yeah, it also lengthened the process.
It was like 3 years before they could.
Period and other stuff.
Right.
That did it. So
Who wants to,
I knew we weren't there, but
Right.
I wanted to inquire, and I thank you for doing the research for me.
You bet. Good question.
What is the lease or rental price for the land that's not owned by the city upon which we spread these biosolids or have them spread?
Well, the Sunflower Ag is responsible to find and make arrangements and lease properties with other farmers. So that's really his responsibility, and he is building in a little price increase due to.
And I saw that, but do we know what he's paying for rental?
Well, I know that he is having to pay a little bit of a surcharge for the use of that land. And so, yeah, he I think it was like $4 a ton is what he's having to pay. And so that cost was built into the overall tonnage that's being spread out there. And he's leasing part of that land to farm himself, and he's not having to pay any surcharge on that. But there's other land that another farmer is farming that he's not farming, and so he's having to pay a surcharge on that property. And it really is all about location, and we don't have to pay somebody to truck any of these biosolids to a farm maybe 15 miles away like a lot of other communities do. So the location that we have is really beneficial. So even with paying that surcharge, I believe that the price that we're getting is
do you
very fair.
not know what he's paying to lease that land for this disposal?
To lease the land to farm it?
No, for the portion that's used for disposal of the not disposal, but anyway, spreading the biosolids.
He's paying $4 for every ton.
For every ton, that's it. Okay. And though the 7% increase that's built in is included in that $4 that you're referencing?
That's right.
Okay.
That's 7%, yes.
Okay.
Or 8.7.
Brian, I noticed this is a 3-year contract. Are the previous contracts just been 1 year at a time?
No, last year's was just 1 year because we ran up against some time limitations.
Okay, that's the difference.
And we were shooting for a 5-year time period, but he could only negotiate a 3-year time period for some of the farm ground that he's spreading on.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff?
I move to approve the agreement with Sunflower Ag Enterprises for services related to the removal, transportation, land application, and agronomic management of dewatered municipal biosolids, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Light?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Last item.
Item 8F, consider agreement with Burns and McDonnell for Fourth and Carry Farmland Pilot Remediation Project.
Okay, back in 1994, the city signed a consent agreement with KDHE to investigate and clean up groundwater contamination in the site commonly referred to as Fourth and Carry. And there's a map showing that large area up on the screen. In 2006, the city spent about $700,000 on an air sparge and soil vapor extraction treatment at 3 source area locations along the Farmland J elevator and at 1 location along the Bungie elevator. And for the most part, these treatment systems achieved good results. And in 2015, we were able to eliminate 2 of the treatment systems at Farmland J and the 1 treatment system at the Bungie elevator. We did have to keep 1 of those systems in operation. And in 2016, that system completely failed. Basically, the equipment within there, the air compressors, the other equipment, they completely failed. Electrical systems just came to the end of their useful life. So we were hoping to see the contamination at that 1 site decrease. Unfortunately, we have not. Here is a graph of one of our monitoring wells out there at that site along Farmland J elevator. And this is from 2004 through 2019. And you can see that the blue line is the carbon tetrachloride, and it's up in the 400 to 500 micrograms per liter. The maximum contaminant level for that is 5. And you can really see that in 2015 through 2019, we've seen a trend up, indicating that there is still some active source contamination at that particular site. So KDHE has asked us to come up with either rehabbing that existing air sparge equipment or come up with a new alternative to treat this source area contamination. And so through 2018 and 2019, we studied some different treatment systems, and we've come up with a pilot test work plan that's been approved by KDHE. And I've got Denny Mosier here with Burns and Mac to explain that process.
Thank you for your patience.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks to the mayor and the council for having me here. Let's see here.
When I met him on the way in at 8 a.m. or 8:30 this morning, I don't think he anticipated exactly where he fell within the agenda. So once again, thank you.
I'm learning a lot. This has been interesting.
Very fun. Very fun.
So what you're looking at here, if you can hear me, is the current disposition of the carbon tet plume there just at the elevator. And what we're planning to do...
And there's a small one off to the east and a little bit north of there, right?
Right, and we may get to that if the state requires us to, but right now we're testing 2 products that are designed to inject into the groundwater, and they will degrade the contaminants in a couple of different ways. We'll get to that.
Okay.
So what you're looking at here is the 2 separate areas that we're going to propose to perform our injections, and they're located in areas where we've got the high concentration carbon tet in the monitoring wells there. We're also going to install a couple of wells to better monitor that situation, because once we do the injection, there's going to be a period of about a year where we monitor the results to make sure that it's effective, and we're actually comparing 2 different products, so we're going to see which one is more effective perhaps, with the thought that if we need to go back and re-inject anywhere, we'll use the best product. This is a more of a detailed look at the injection areas. What you're seeing at the top there is 9 injection points. And then at the bottom, you're looking at a cross-sectional view of it, and you see a couple of wells there, and then you can see the injection intervals. Hopefully you can hear me, but we'll go to the water table at about, you can see it's about 12 feet into it, so we're going to a total depth of 28 feet below ground surface. We're going to get a little bit above the water table to kind of catch what we think is probably some residual contaminants hanging out in that, what we call the capillary fringe, where the groundwater moves up and down and it continually mobilizes some of those contaminants that are hanging out in there. And recently we've seen some pretty drastic water level fluctuations, particularly in Hutchinson, but throughout the state. So that complicates things a little bit, but that probably also mobilized some more of those contaminants that we're seeing. And the issue that the state is having is that we're seeing these unstable trends, and what we aim to do here is establish a downward trend, which generally KDHE will accept long-term monitoring, or sort of a passive monitoring instead of a further active remediation. So that's our goal here, is to get those contaminant levels to trending back down, and then we'll kind of see where we're at with KDHE at that point.
Does the data show that there's any substantial down gradient?
No. Let's go back to the plume map. This is all we have right now. So
okay,
we're going to try to attack the large plume, see how that does. And right now, KDHE hasn't expressed necessarily that we would be required to do anything over onto the east side, because we're not seeing an upward trend really there. So it's really the areas where we're seeing the upward trend that concerns them, and since we don't have an active remediation going on, we don't have control of it.
On the legend, the white circle says historic plume boundaries, but I can't identify it. Is that because it's grown? Oh, excuse me. Thank you. Okay, that's the.
Oh, okay.
You can see how significant it was, and
very much so.
And the other system that was installed and operated was effective for a time, and then the effectiveness diminished over time, and then it just completely failed.
Okay. All right. That helps. I wasn't identifying those lines.
Yeah, that's hard to see. I admit. Let's see. And this is really just a schematic of the second injection area, just like the first one. So again, you have 9 injection points. We're doing a very similar injection interval, although it's a little shallower over in the other area, so we're not going as deep there.
When you say other area, you talk about that smaller?
Pardon me?
When you say other area, you're talking about that smaller plume, or?
I apologize.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, they're both within
that bigger, okay, gotcha.
So our hope is that even this pilot test might get us to that point. It's a very real possibility that when we do the pilot test injections, we can reestablish those downward trends, and we may not have to do any further injections beyond the pilot test.
So what are you injecting? What are you putting in?
There's 2 products. One is called EHC, and the other one is called Geoform. And their products, they'll come to us in a powdered form, and then we'll mix it on site. They contain plant-based organic carbon, which is basically it's food for the bacteria that are naturally occurring in the groundwater. So they will feed on that, populate, and their metabolism destroys the contaminants. The other part of this material has what's called zero-valent iron, which is just very, very small iron particles that also provide basically a physical destruction of the contaminant by contact. So it provides surfacing for these reactions to occur that further degrade the contaminants. And perhaps what we like most about these products is they will persist for at least 5 years, and we've got a case study at a similar site here in Kansas where it's still effective 12 years after the injection. So it's still degrading 90% of the contaminants that are flowing through this permeable reactive barrier that we establish. with these injections.
And you said the pilot is a test, but you hold hopes that maybe even that would be adequate.
Absolutely. You know, we kind of get, you know, the terms are confusing, but we call this a pilot test, but there's definitely going to be some remediation accomplished, and it may be enough. Like I said, I think what I've heard is that we want to take, you know, just not a real aggressive approach, because that means more money.
Sure.
So we're going to kind of try to meter this out and see what this does, and then hopefully, you know, worst case scenario, we're just maybe doing some precise injections in certain areas, if at all.
Very good.
So how does this, and Brian, maybe this is a question for you, but how does this compare to cost-wise? Repairing the equipment or replacing the equipment that failed 4 or 5 years ago, 5 years ago?
Yeah, and I don't have a figure cost-wise, but I know that was a question I had as well for Burns and McDonald. And the issue is the type of the soil that we've got out there, a little bit of a clay soil. And so there's just specific air channels that are being developed in this air sparging and soil vapor extraction, which leads it to be not as effective. Since the beginning in this particular area, we never saw the results that we were hoping to see.
In this plume that's still left.
Exactly. So really felt like the best move was to get away from the air sparge and soil vapor extraction treatment and go to a direct injection of some media.
Yeah, you did a good job of explaining that. And initially, you know, when you had a lot of contaminant mass there, it was fairly effective, although, you know, generally in these types of environments, and when you've got residual contaminants that are in clays and tight clays, the air sparging and SVE systems have minimal effect. And now that you're down to just kind of the residual contaminants, you don't have a large mass to attack. It's air sparging and soil vapor extraction is not a very efficient way to go. And we have not done an actual cost to rehab that system, but it would be substantial, and I guarantee it would be a lot more than this pilot test.
Mm-hmm. It seems like more of a surgical approach is warranted at this point.
And there's no O&M costs associated with these injections. There's no equipment to maintain. No one's got to go out and operate it, maintain it, repair it, take readings,
put it
anything
in.
like that.
And that the data collection will continue to come out of the wells that we've got there for that purpose.
Absolutely. You know, over time, you know, we're going to do a what's called performance monitoring. So we're going to sample certain wells on a quarterly basis. So we're making sure that we're getting all the data that we need in a timely manner. But after a year or two, we would just resume the regular routine monitoring you're doing. So you wouldn't even notice any additional expense going forward outside of what you're doing already right now.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. I think that was explained very well. Thank you.
Yeah.
And is there any other questions, though, while we have the gentleman up? Or
I don't think so.
questions of staff or a motion?
Well, I would move to approve the agreement with Burns and McDonald for the 4th and Cary Farmland J Northwest Silent Height Remediation Project and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dayline?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus Carvalho?
Yes.
Inslee?
Yes. Last item.
Item 9, report of city officials.
Okay. Nancy.
Nothing.
John?
Nothing.
Steve?
Sure to vote. Open till 7, another 7 hours and 15 or so minutes.
Correct. Jade?
That's all I had as well. Remember to vote. Thank you.
Be sure and vote. And yeah, absolutely. That's all I got. City manager?
Couple quick things. Under my report, and I think I put a copy there, but we'd had a request to run a speed study up there at 30th between Lorraine and K61. Engineering staff has run that speed study a couple different times. The last time basically, you know, reflected that the current speed limit of 45 miles per hour was within reason. The most recent study that was done indicated the same. The current speed limit's 45. I think there's been some question to one of the council members from a citizen up in that area. But basically, I'm just reporting this to you that after reviewing that, the staff's recommendation is that the speed stay as it is posted at 45. If the council wants to do something different with that, then I would suggest you look at this being an agenda item at some point in time. But
Nice try, Dave Line.
In all seriousness, really, in all seriousness, I've had this on my radar for several years, and I appreciate and understand the engineering model that is used, and I value that. But I think we need to localize this. I really do believe we need to localize this and address it as a Hutchinson issue, not a model of a national engineering model. And would like to put it on the agenda.
You want 20 miles an hour?
We've got 2 school zones there. I would be interested in knowing the traffic flow since the Dillon's Marketplace opened up. I think it's very confusing to the drivers. I know there's accident rates, and I know all of those things, but I think we need to use some common sense and apply it to the local conditions. And I believe the 45-mile-an-hour speed limit is excessive, and I would stand on that, and I have for some time.
And I will add, this was not John's.
No,
this was actually a citizen that approached myself that has a business on the street there and inquired about that. So it's not just you.
No, I
and you do
know.
that, and you do
No.
that. But if we are going to put it on the agenda, and I'm not averse to doing so, I guess I would ask that we have the additional studies that are done. And one of the things that was brought to my attention was the placement of where the strips, if you will, were placed at that time. If then we need to put some further down the street towards the schools, or if that only complicates the matter, or what.
You're talking about the traffic counting equipment strips?
Yeah, that measure the speeds and the count and so on and so forth.
Okay, well, I think we need the accident data. We need to know how many times people have been cited by police for going through the school zones at excessive speeds, all that kind of stuff. I mean, we need lots of info.
And we're talking just from Lorraine to K61?
East to K61, yeah.
What would you suggest putting it down to?
Well, what's the other 35? I'm
Yeah,
guessing.
there's
35.
35, which means people drive 40.
Yeah.
No, we can bring it back. We wouldn't need to do any more studies or speed studies.
If you have that information.
Yeah, I mean, we've got traffic counts, but it seems like there's
I'm
a
more
suggestion to lower it. Yeah.
Accident info.
Most of the accidents I know we've looked at has been not speed related, but more of the turning movements.
Yeah.
You know, people.
Okay, well,
yeah.
Some of that.
That's all.
But we can certainly do that.
And maybe Rebecca in the back, if you could put out that this is a conversation that's being had, so maybe those that
See what
follow us
people
on
think, yeah.
Facebook, follow us on the website, can maybe have an opportunity to contribute pro or con.
Yeah.
You'll love this one, but seriously, if we move that direction, might we want to look at a reconfiguration of the number of lanes and whatnot? Part of that is a traffic and speed control thing. So I would suggest we keep that in mind. I at least would hope it's not off the table if in fact we go down to 35, because we're going to have a learning curve there. And anyway, I just want to throw that out there. I mean, 4 lanes with a turning lane certainly does not lend itself to leisurely driving. It's meant to be what it is.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, are we talking speed? Are we talking traffic calming? I mean, that's a whole nother
To me, I think they're related. I mean, we can put anyway, we can talk more about that. I think it's a good thing to put out there and
I
have
think
some,
so. I think we need a
honest discussion.
A full discussion on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so again,
On
just
the
to be
s- on the
clear.
speed?
On the speed. Okay.
Well, I don't separate the two.
Yeah.
It seems to me speed and traffic calming are very much interconnected. Maybe I'm mistaken, but anyhow.
Yeah, but the two are kind of broad. In
It's a big difference.
Big difference.
Let's, if anybody's open to it, let's put it on the agenda as a speed, but let's be open to the conversation of looking at it as a broader. I don't even know what the scheduled maintenance looks like on that particular stretch, because I think we'd want to tie that in at a similar time.
You know, we just did an overlay this last spring.
Yeah.
Right.
or summer, yeah.
Okay, so let's.
We'll do the speed.
Speed, okay.
Do the speed.
Now that that's been decided, can I ask you one more time, and I know you told me, what was the maximum speed during that time trial?
Well, let's see if we have a bet on the council as to what it might have been, over, under.
The over and under?
Was 75. Was it over or under 75 miles an hour?
Over.
Yeah, depending on.
It was over.
Yeah.
We had a, what'd I tell you, 92?
I think it was 90 plus mile an hour, or in the neighborhood of 11
Oh, really?
p.m.
But it was in the middle of the
Midnight or
night,
something
yeah,
like that,
kind of
yeah.
deal, so. And it wasn't a police car or anything like that.
Right.
Whoa.
Right, so it lends itself to speed.
Really?
One other thing, because I know we got another agenda item. We just, the governor and the Secretary of Transportation just announced this morning the cost share program projects, and good news is that our Apple Lane project was one of the 22 out of
Really?
out of 100 applications that was selected, and so that was an estimated $2 million plus project, and so we'll get $1 million from the
So that's been
cost share.
approved.
It
Yeah.
has been approved. huh?
Fantastic.
What about
And the
the
cost
bridge?
share, huh?
Well, no, it was not. There were 22 projects, and don't believe that was one of them. But again, hats off to Jeff and his staff, because you guys remember this was a very quick turnaround process to get
turnaround
an
on the
application put in, put together. It's a good project, and we just saved ourselves $1 million today. So
Great.
Very nice.
good news.
Ah, Jeff.
Kudos, Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeff, you
excellent
need to
work.
talk to somebody about, some cost share with the employee on that.
Any word on the Woody seat yet, or is that?
Well, the only word we've
To
got
be
there is that it may be sooner than this end of December. It might be towards the end of November that we'll hear. But we have not heard anything, no.
Okay,
No, have heard nothing.
haven't heard nothing.
Are you going to talk about the trees anymore?
Well, I wasn't. I mean,
Well, I guess I just want,
I don't know what, I mean, just to be
I
clear,
wanted to suggest that the fire department be involved in the discussion that.
we've had them involved,
Okay, that's it.
yeah. And everything, again, the most recent landscape ordinance that you guys have looked at recently does not address feet within fire hydrants, and we identified apparently there were 3 trees, and then turns out there were 6 trees, and I wasn't in the mood to cut 6 trees down just because of
Yeah.
one complaint that's really not, it's really a conflict in our code,
Right.
if you will. And I will say that you guys know from time to time, we look at codes all the time that aren't working, we change them. And so there's no shame in looking at that and changing the
Start
code.
the process of
Yeah,
changing.
so,
Changing?
yeah.
Yes.
And the
Get it consistent.
the tree
To
board
be
will look at that.
consistent, yes, right.
Well, I
Yeah.
take it, yeah, both
That makes
will be
sense.
looked at
Yeah, and right.
there'll be one resulting out of the 2 that
Right.
exist now.
You
Okay.
know, and the tree board will look at that, because there were some other things in that, because I think the tree board code goes back to early 90s or something, I can't recall that, but landscape ordinance, and we've had a landscape architect that's on the tree board that basically shared that when they design landscape for businesses, it's based on the Section 27 code, so.
Just get it consistent.
Get it consistent.
Yep, we get it consistent.
That's the main
So,
thing.
with that, that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Very good. I've got a 12 o'clock, so can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved.
And second?
Second.
And second.
Sorry.
Speak up.
Second?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
We've all got a 12.
So we're moving at
Yeah.
the zoo, or meeting at the zoo?
Where is that?
Zoo.
At the